Hey guys, tonight we're taking a journey back in time, not to a grand battlefield or royal court, but to a much quieter, and in many ways, a much harsher place. We're going to explore the Industrial Revolution, but through a very specific lens, the food or lack thereof that was given to the children who powered the factories. It's a story that shatters any romantic ideas about the era, and a stark reminder that for the most vulnerable, progress often comes at a terrible price. You'd probably find the conditions, and especially the menu, almost unbelievable. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. It truly helps the channel find others who might appreciate these quiet journeys into the past. And while you're at it, I'd love to know where you're listening from. Go ahead and leave your city and the time in the comments below. It's always a comfort to see where our little community is scattered across the globe. Now, dim the lights. Maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum. And let's ease into tonight's journey together. The cottage is quiet. The only sounds are the soft crackle of the last embers in the hearth and the gentle sigh of the wind as it slips through the thatched roof. You're sitting at a rough-hewn wooden table, your small legs dangling just above the cold, packed earth floor. The air smells of wood smoke, damp wool, and something else so quiet, heavy sadness that seems to have settled into the very walls of your home. In front of you sits your last real meal. It isn't a feast. There's no gleaming roast or colorful assortment of vegetables. It's the food of the land, the food of a family clinging to the edge of survival. There is a single, thick slice of dark bread. It's not the light, airy bread of the wealthy. It's a muslin loaf, made from a mix of rye and wheat grown together in the same field, a humble, practical bread for those who can't afford to be picky about their grains. It's heavy in your hand, dense and substantial. Beside it is a small wedge of hard, pale cheese, sharp and salty on your tongue, and in a chipped earthenware mug, there's milk, real milk, still faintly warm, with a layer of cream you can see at the top. It coats your mouth in a way you take for granted. Your mother pushes the largest piece of bread towards you. She doesn't say anything. Her hands, chapped and dreadened from a life of hard work, do all the talking. They are hands that have mended your clothes, tended the small garden, and are now packing your few belongings into a small cloth bundle. Her face, illuminated by the flickering candlelight, is a mask of stoicism, but you can see the strain around her eyes. This meal is a sacrifice. It's more than she and your father will eat tonight. It's their hope, their fear, and their love, all condensed into a few simple mouthfuls meant to fortify you for the journey ahead. You are leaving. A man from the city came weeks ago. He had a loud voice and shiny boots, and he spoke of a wondrous place called a factory. He promised a warm bed, 3 meals a day, and wages, real money that would be sent back home to help the family. For rural families like yours, pushed to the brink by the enclosure of common lands that your ancestors had farmed for generations. This promise was like a lifeline in a storm. This is a well-documented part of the era. Economic desperation, not a lack of love, was the primary driver that sent millions of children from the countryside into the maw of the industrial cities. You chew the dense bread slowly, trying to make it last. You watch the single candle flame dance, casting long, wavering shadows on the wall. You feel the scratch of the wool shawl wrapped around your shoulders. You are young, and the man's words have painted a picture in your mind of a grand adventure. You imagine the city with its tall buildings and countless lights. You imagine the factory as a place of noisy, exciting machines. You don't understand the silence in the room. You don't understand the way your father stares into the fire. His jaw tight, Historians still argue about this moment, repeated in countless cottages across the country. Was your family's decision an act of pure desperation, a surrender to overwhelming economic forces? Or was there also a sliver of hope, a genuine belief, however faint, that the factory agent's promises were ruined, that this was a path to a better life, away from the precarious existence of subsistence farming? The silence of your parents holds the weight of that impossible question. It's a mix of grief for the childhood you are losing on the desperate prayer that they are doing the right thing. You finish the last crumb of cheese, lick the last drop of creamy milk from your lips. The taste is rich, honest, and grounding. It tastes like home. You don't know it yet, but you are committing this flavor to memory. This simple, rustic meal, given with silent love, will become a ghost that haunts your palate. It is the benchmark against which all future meals will be measured. It is the last time, for a very, very long time, that food will be an act of nourishment and care, rather than a mere tool for survival. As your mother wraps your bundle a little tighter, you feel a drowsiness creep in. You lean your head against the rough spun fabric of her dress, and for a moment, you drift off, the taste of real bread still on your tongue, a memory you don't yet know you'll need to cherish for the rest of your life. The world returns to you not with the gentle crowing of a rooster or the soft light of dawn filtering through a familiar window, but with a jarring, rhythmic jolt. You open your eyes. The memory of the warm hearth and your mother's presence dissolves like mist. You are in the back of a large, open-topped cart, wedged between other children, all silent and wide-eyed, their small bundles clutched tightly in their laps. The journey itself is a smudge in your memory along, uncomfortable blur of rocking motion and the cold seeping into your bones. But now, the rocking has a new, harsh rhythm. The wheels are no longer on a soft dirt track. They are clattering loudly over hard, uneven stones. The noise is the first thing that truly assaults you. It's a deafening wall of sound, unlike anything you've ever experienced. Not the sound of a village market, with its friendly chatter and the bleating of sheep, but a chaotic, grinding roar. There are the shouts of men, the rumble of countless other carts, the distant, rhythmic thumping of machinery you can't yet see, and the sharp, piercing cries of vendors. It's a river of noise that rushes over you, making you feel small and lost. You pull your thin shawl tighter, as if it could somehow muffle the world. Then, the smell hits you. It's so powerful, so alien, that for a moment you think you might be sick. At home, the air smelled of damp earth after rain, of hay in the barn, of wood smoke from the chimney. It was the smell of life, of things growing and things being made warm. This is the opposite. This is the smell of things being burned, and broken, and left to rot. First, there is the smoke. It hangs in the air in a thick, yellowish-brown haze that stings your eyes and catches in the back of your throat. It's not the fragrant, comforting smoke of a wood fire. This is a sharp, metallic, and deeply unpleasant smell, the smell of thousands of chimneys all belching out the fumes of burning coal. It creates a permanent twilight, dimming the sun so that even at midday, the sky is a dirty, bruised gray. The buildings, tall and narrow and packed together, are coated in a layer of black grime. You notice it's not a dry dust. It's a greasy, sticky soot that stains everything it touches. From the brickwork to the clothes of the people rushing past, this greasy film seems to cover the entire city, and you can already feel it settling on your own skin. Beneath the smoke, there are other, fouler scents. The cart rumbles past a dark, sluggish river, and a wave of stench rises from it, a sour, chemical odor mixed with the unmistakable smell of sewage. You see rainbow sheens of industrial runoff swirling on the surface. This isn't a river for fish or for washing clothes. It's a dumping ground. The streets themselves are no better. They are choked with a mixture of mud, horse manure, and refuse tossed from windows. The air is thick with the smell of unwashed bodies, crammed into tight spaces and the faint, sweetish odor of decay from piles of garbage in the alleyways. You look at the faces of the people hurrying along the pavements. They seem not to notice the smell, or the filth, or the noise. They navigate this chaotic world with a grim determination. The man leading your group, the one with the shiny boots who now seems much less grand, points a thumb towards a forest of towering brick chimneys in the distance, each one vomiting a thick plume of black smoke into the sky. He might say something with a grim sort of pride, something like, "That's the smell of work, the smell of progress." And this is a point that historians and sociologists still puzzle over. Did the people of this era really become accustomed to this overwhelming sensory assault, simply tuning it out to survive? Or did they interpret this pollution differently? For many, the sight of a smoke-filled sky was not a sign of environmental disaster, as we would see it today, but a symbol of productivity, of jobs, of a city that was alive and churning out wealth. They might have hated the stench and the grime on a personal level, but accepted it as the unavoidable price of employment, the smell of survival, if not opportunity. But for you, a child fresh from the clean air of the countryside, it is simply suffocating. You try breathing through your mouth, but the taste of the air is as bad as its smell, gritty and foul. You bury your nose in your woolen shawl, but the fabric already seems to be absorbing the city as perfume. The cart turns a corner. In the vast, dark building looms before you. It is several stories high, with rows of small, dark windows that stare down like vacant eyes. It has its own tall chimney, adding its personal contribution to the oppressive blanket overhead. The rhythmic thumping you heard in the distance is louder now, a constant, deep heartbeat coming from within the brick monster. This is it, the factory, the place of wonders the man had promised. As the cart clatter is to a halt before a large, imposing gate, the city's smell seems to concentrate here, mixed with a new scent of damp wool and machine oil. You are nudged from the cart, your feet landing unsteadily on the grimy cobblestones. You look up at the immense building, then back at the hazy, alien sky, the memory of your last meal, the simple, honest taste of dark bread and fresh milk feels like a story from another life. You have arrived, and the first thing you learn is that your new home is a place where you can't even trust the air you breathe. You're e-guided, or rather, herded, through the imposing factory gates. The deafening roar of machinery you heard from the outside becomes an all-consuming physical presence inside the yard. It's a sound that vibrates through the soles of your thin shoes and into your very bones. You and the other children are led past the main factory building, towards a long, low structure at the back of the compound. This is the dormitory and the dining hall, a single, vast room that will serve as both. The air inside is thick with the smell of unwashed bodies, damp bedding, and a faint, sour odor you can't quite place yet. Hours pass, or maybe it's just 1 hour. Time seems to work differently here, marked not by the sun, which you can't see, but by the relentless rhythm of the machines. You are shown a narrow, hard bunk, one of 3 stacked vertically, and told that it is yours. There is no privacy, no space to call your own, just a sea of identical bunks stretching into the dimness of the large hall. Eventually, a loud bell clangs, a harsh, metallic sound that cuts through the ever-present hum of the factory. It's the signal for mealtime. A wave of older children and weary-looking adults shuffles into the hall, their movement sluggish, their faces smudged with grease and grime. They don't talk. They just form a shuffling line, each one holding a small tin bowl. You and the other new arrivals are pushed into the line, clutching the identical bowls that have been thrust into your hands. The line inches forward towards a large, steaming cauldron at the front of the room. A grim-faced woman, her arms as thick as your legs, wields a long-handled ladle. With a practiced, mechanical motion, she plunges the ladle into the cauldron and slops a grayish, semi-liquid substance into each outstretched bowl. When it's your turn, the warm, wet weight lands in your bowl with a disheartening plop. You carry your bowl carefully, finding a space on a long, splintered wooden bench. You look down at your first factory meal. This is the famous gruel. The smell is the first disappointment. It doesn't smell of anything, really. Maybe a faint, tasty smell, like wallpaper paste. It has none of the rich, nutty aroma of the porridge your mother would sometimes make from the oats you grew. You dip a finger in. It's thin, watery, and barely lukewarm. You can see small, grayish lumps floating in a translucent, starchy liquid. This is oat gruel, but it has been stretched to its absolute limit. A small amount of oats has been boiled with a massive quantity of water, cooked just long enough to break down and thicken the water slightly, creating the illusion of a substantial meal. You take your first taste. It's a profound moment of culinary disillusionment. The substance slides down your throat with a slimy, unsettling texture. It has no flavor. Not salty, not sweet, not savory. It is the complete absence of taste. The small, lumpy bits are slightly chewy, but they too offer no flavor. Just a mealy, gritty texture in your mouth. You look around and see everyone else eating it in the same way quickly, mechanically, without any sign of enjoyment. This is not food for pleasure. This is fuel, and very low-grade fuel at that. This was the cornerstone of the workhouse and factory diet, a system designed for maximum economy, not nutrition. The principle was simple. Provide just enough calories to keep a worker on their feet for a 14 to 16-hour workday. Oats were cheap and filling, but even this cheap ingredient was used as sparingly as possible. One of the bizarre, sad facts of this era is the sheer science that went into this kind of penny pinching. Workhouse and factory owners kept meticulous records, calculating the absolute minimum amount of oatmeal per gallon of water required to prevent mass fainting or outright starvation. It was a cold, hard equation of human endurance versus cost. You force yourself to swallow another mouthful, and then another. Your stomach, accustomed to dense, bread-and real milk, feels hollow and cheated. This watery slurry does little to quell the pangs of hunger. In fact, it almost seems to make it worse, filling your stomach with a lukewarm liquid that offers no satisfaction. You think of the bread from last night, how solid and real it felt. This feels like a ghost of a meal, a pale imitation of nourishment. Historians often debate the true nutritional content of such a diet. While on paper, a diet of oat gruel might seem to provide basic carbohydrates, the reality was far grimmer. Was this watery mixture truly enough to sustain a growing child performing hard physical labor? The answer is almost certainly no. Modern analysis suggests that a child laborer's diet was severely deficient in calories, protein, fats, and essential vitamins. This wasn't just a boring diet. It was a diet of systematic, slow-motion starvation, leading to stunted growth, weakened immune systems, and chronic fatigue. The very science the owners used was flawed, based on observation of survival, not health. You scrape the last of the gray paste from your bowl, but you feel no more satisfied than when you started. The hunger is still there, a dull ache in your belly. The bell clangs again, another jarring summons. Mealtime is over. The entire process took no more than 15 minutes. You place your empty bowl and a pile and are ushered out of the dining hall and into the main factory building for the first time. The roar of the machines becomes a physical blow. The air is thick with cotton fibers that float like snow and clog your throat. An overseer points you towards a gigantic, clattering loom and begins to shout instructions over the noise. Your stomach feels empty and queasy. Your first shift has begun, fueled by nothing more than a bowl of watery lies. And you realize, with the dawning, cold sense of dread, that you will eat the same meal tomorrow, and the day after that, and the day after that. This is your new reality. The days bleed into one another, each one a relentless cycle of waking in the cold dark, working in the deafening roar, and sleeping in the crowded hall, all punctuated by the clang of the meal bell and another bowl of that same tasteless gruel. But once a day, usually with the midday meal, you receive something else, something solid. You receive a piece of bread. The first time it's handed to you, a flicker of hope ignites in your chest. Bread, the word itself is comforting, a memory of home, of substance, of real food. You take the small, grayish block in your hand. It feels strangely light, almost porous, and it has a peculiar, dried texture. It doesn't have the rich, dark color of the rind wheat loaf your mother used to bake. This bread is a pale, anemic color, with a crust that isn't crispy or chewy, but brittle, almost chalky. You bring it to your mouth and take a bite. The hope dies instantly. The texture is all wrong. It's gritty. There's a fine, powdery sensation that coats your tongue and teeth. A subtle crunch that has nothing to do with a good crust. It tastes vaguely of flour, but there's a dusty, mineral aftertaste that is deeply unpleasant and unnatural. It's dry, incredibly so, and it seems to suck all the moisture from your mouth, making it difficult to swallow. You tear a piece off and look at it closely in the dim light of the dining hall. The crumb structure isn't soft or chewy. It's strangely uniform and dense, almost like packed dust. You realize with a sickening certainty, this is not just bread. There is something else in here. You are eating what was known as adulterated bread, one of the most common and insidious forms of food fraud in the 19th century. The historical record on this is disturbingly clear. Unscrupulous bakers, driven by profit and supplying large institutions like factories and workhouses, would mix cheap, and often non-edible, fillers into their dough to increase its weight and volume. This allowed them to use less expensive flour and sell the resulting loaf for the same price, pocketing the difference. The list of adulterants is a testament to human ingenuity in the service of greed. The most common additive was alum, a chemical compound, potassium aluminum sulfate, that acted as a whitener. Millers would add it to lower grade, discolored flour to make it look like the more expensive, pure white flour preferred by the wealthy. Alum also helped the bread retain water, making the loaf heavier and seem fresher than it was. But it was known to cause severe digestive issues, and its long-term effects were debilitating. But it didn't stop with alum. To add sheer bulk and weight, bakers would mix in anything that was cheap and could be ground into a fine powder. Chalk and ground-up bone were frequent additions. Sawdust, swept from the floors of mills, was another. Some of the most shocking reports from the era mention things like plaster of Paris and even clay being used. Yo, with your gritty, dusty mouthful of bread, could be eating any combination of these. Your body, already starved for nutrients, is trying to process not just low-quality flour, but chemical agents and indigestible fillers. This practice was so widespread that it became a public health crisis. The pioneering journalist and chemist Arthur Hill Hassel, in the 1852, famously analyzed hundreds of food samples in London and found that adulteration was the norm, not the exception. His work, published in the medical journal The Lancet, shocked the nation and was a major catalyst for food safety legislation. But for you, in the factory, that legislation is years, even decades, away. You are living in the wild west of food production. There is, however, an ongoing debate among historians about the full intentionality behind this. Was every baker who used these additives a malicious villain, knowingly poisoning his customers? Some certainly were, but others may have been caught in a system, buying flour that was already adulterated by the miller without their knowledge. Or perhaps they were simply following common practice, using additives like alum not with the intent to harm, but because it was just how bread was made to achieve the desired look and feel for a low price. The line between deliberate deception and complicity in a corrupt system was often blurry. You look down at the remaining piece of bread in your hand. It's a lie. A calculated deception designed to look and feel like food, but offering a fraction of the nourishment. The gruel was honest in its inadequacy. It was openly just watery oats. This bread is something far more sinister. It pretends to be sustenance. It's a betrayal of the most basic trust between a provider and a consumer. You force yourself to eat the rest of it. You have to. The gnawing emptiness in your stomach demands anything solid. You use your tongue to work the gritty paste off your teeth and swallow it down with a gulp of water from a communal tin cup water that has its own metallic, unpleasant taste. As you finish, the feeling in your stomach is not one of satisfaction, but of a heavy, uncomfortable fullness. It's the feeling of being filled, but not fed. And as you head back into the roaring factory for the second half of your shift, you carry that gritty, chatty lie in your belly, a heavy secret your body now has to deal with. Some mornings, a different kind of ration appears alongside your bowl of gruel. It's not the gritty bread, but a small tin cup containing a thin, bluish-white liquid. The first time you see it, a jolt of recognition, a faint memory of home, makes your heart leap. Milk. You remember the thick, creamy milk from your mother's mug, the rich taste that coated your tongue. Eagerly, you lift the cup to your lips. The disappointment is immediate and sharp. It's like drinking pale, cloudy water. There is a hint of something vaguely milky about it, but it's weak, thin, and utterly devoid of the richness you remember. It has a slightly chalky texture that leaves a faint, powdery residue on your gums, a sensation that is unnervingly similar to the adulterated bread. The liquid is cold and unsatisfying, doing nothing to warm you or quell the ache in your stomach. It's another ghost of a food, a phantom imitation of the real thing. You are drinking milk from a city dairy, which in the industrial era was often a far cry from a bucolic pasture. The reality was a squalid urban business. Cows were often kept in cramped, filthy sheds, sometimes in the cellars of buildings, where they rarely saw sunlight and were fed on distillery mash and other industrial leftovers. These stressed, unhealthy animals produced thin, poorer quality milk to begin with, but that was only the start of the problem. Watery tasting, or rather, not tasting, is the result of another near universal form of food adulteration. To maximize profits, dairymen and milk sellers would dilute the milk with water, sometimes doubling or even tripling its volume. This was known as the black cow in the slang of the day, a reference to the water pump that was thus as essential to the dairy-esque business as the real cows. Historical accounts from reformers and doctors of the period are filled with outrage at this practice. They described milk that was so heavily watered down it had a noticeable blue tint. That watered-down milk wouldn't look right. It was too translucent, too obviously tampered with. So, to restore its milky white appearance, sellers would add whiteners. The most common was chalk, ground into a fine powder and stirred in to create a cloudy opacity. Sometimes, they'd use boiled starches or even mashed animal brains, an unsettling but documented practice, to thicken the liquid and give it a more convincing texture. The chalky aftertaste you're experiencing is the literal residue of this deception. This practice had devastating consequences, especially for the youngest and most vulnerable, for infants in the cities who couldn't be breastfed. This adulterated milk was their primary source of nutrition. They were being fed a liquid that was not only stripped of its essential fats and proteins, but was often contaminated. The water used for dilution was frequently drawn from the same polluted rivers and wells that carried diseases like cholera and typhoid. And the chalk itself, while not acutely poisonous, could cause severe gastrointestinal distress in a small child system. The infant mortality rate in these industrial cities was staggeringly high, and this killer milk was a major contributing factor. One of the more peculiar and grimly fascinating pieces of trivia from this time is the existence of milk testing tools. As public awareness of the problem grew, so did attempts to combat it. People used simple devices called lactometers, which measured the specific gravity of the liquid. The idea was that pure milk had a certain density, and adding water would lower it. However, the counterfeiters quickly adapted. They learned to add just the right amount of thickening agents, like starch or gelatin, to the watered-down milk to fool the lactometer, bringing the density right back to where it should be. It was a constant arms race between science and fraud, played out in the breakfast cups of the nation's poor. Historians still debate the extent to which the average consumer was aware of the specific adulterants. Did you, as a child in the factory, know you were drinking chalk? Probably not in a specific chemical sense, but you would have known, with the certainty of your own senses, that this was not real milk. You would have known it was bad or thinned. The adulteration might have been a vague concept, but the reality of being cheated was a daily experience. People knew the food was poor, but with no alternatives and no power, they were forced to accept it. The anger was a low, simmering resentment, a feeling of being systematically swindled by a system you couldn't see or fight. You finish the cup of chalky water. It leaves your stomach feeling cold and sloshing. It provides a brief moment of hydration but zero comfort and negligible energy. You look at the other children, all quietly drinking their own portions. No one complains. There's no one to complain to. Complaining would only draw the attention of the overseer, and that could mean a blow or, even worse, the loss of your next meager meal. So you remain silent. You set the empty tin cup down, the faint taste of chalk and deception still in your mouth. Another part of your memory of home, the memory of what real food tastes like, has been overwritten by a cheap, industrial counterfeit, and the long workday stretches ahead, demanding energy you simply haven't been given. The gruel becomes the constant, the gray anchor of your existence. Morning and night, the bell clangs, the line shuffles forward, and the same taste was. Lukewarm slurry fills your bowl. It is the alpha and omega of your factory life. You stop thinking of it as a meal. It is simply a ritual, a necessary act you perform to get through to the next part of the day. Your relationship with the gruel evolves. At first, it was a source of profound disappointment. Now, it is an object of intense scrutiny, with nothing else to occupy your mind during the brief, silent meal times. You become a reluctant connoisseur of its flaws. You begin to notice the subtle variations, the small horrors that make one day's gruel different from the next. Sometimes, the consistency is different. On a good day, it might be slightly thicker, with more lumpy bits of oat, suggesting the cook was feeling generous or simply misjudged the water-to-oat ratio. These are the days you feel a fraction less hollow after eating. On a bad day, it's barely distinguishable from cloudy water, a thin, translucent film that offers no substance at all. You can see the bottom of your tin bowl through it. On these days, the hunger pangs return with a vengeance almost before you set the bowl down. You start to find things in it, not intentionally added things, like the chalk in the bread, but accidental, unwelcome additions that speak to the filth of the kitchen and the complete lack of care. A stray piece of straw, a bit of grit that crunches between your teeth. Sometimes, you see the dark, lifeless body of a weevil that was boiled along with the oats. The first time you find one, you feel a wave of nausea, but you watch the older children. They simply flick it out with a finger and keep eating, their faces impassive. You learn to do the same. Hunger is a powerful teacher, and it teaches you to overlook things that would once have horrified you. This is the grim reality of mass-produced institutional food in an era before hygiene standards. The kitchens were often as dirty as the factories themselves. Ingredients like flour and oats were stored in open sacks, vulnerable to pests like insects and rodents. The water came from the same polluted sources everyone else used. There was no concept of sanitation, no hand washing, no clean surfaces. The people preparing the food were often just other workers, paid a pittance and given no training. The pot itself was likely never properly scrubbed, just refilled for the next meal, the residue of the last meal forming a permanent crust on the inside. You learn to eat it strategically. You learn that if you eat it too fast, you just feel sick and bloated. If you eat it too slow, it gets golden congee less into a particularly unpleasant, jelly-like substance. The trick is to find the right rhythm, eating it steadily and without thinking too much about it. You focus on the mechanical act of spoon to bowl to mouth, swallow, repeat. You try to disconnect your mind from what your body is doing. One of the more peculiar debates among social historians of the period is about the psychology of monotony. What does eating the exact same, flavorless meal twice a day, every day, for years, do to a person's spirit? Some argue it was a deliberate to love control, a way to crush individuality and enforce a sense of institutional dependency. By removing all pleasure and variation from food, you remove a fundamental part of human experience, making people more docile and machine-like, just another cog in the factory system. Others contend it was less a conspiracy and more a simple, brutal economic calculation. This was the cheapest possible way to keep a workforce functioning, and any psychological impact was simply an unintended and ignored byproduct. You see the effects of this dye attached on the faces and bodies around you. Everyone is pale and thin. Many have a listlessness about them, a chronic fatigue that even a night's sleep can't cure. Sores take longer to heal. A simple cough seems to linger for weeks. You are all living in a state of perpetual malnutrition. Your body's fighting a constant, losing battle against the demands of the work and the inadequacy of the fuel. You start to have fantasies about food, not of feasts or grand meals, but of simple things. The sharp, salty taste of the cheese you had on your last night at home. The dense, heavy feel of real bread in your hand. You try to conjure the flavors in your mind, but they are becoming faint, like a fading dream. The gruel is a great eraser of memory. Its persistent blandness is wiping your palate clean, replacing a world of taste with a single, gray, nullifying note. You finish your bowl. You can feel the watery mixture sloshing in your stomach. It provides a brief sensation of fullness, but it's a deceptive one. There is no energy in it, no warmth, no comfort. It is the essence of anti-food. As you stand up to go back to the looms, you feel a familiar dizziness, a lightheadedness that comes from chronic hunger. You steady yourself against the bench for a moment. The factory whistle will blow soon, signaling the end of the shift. But you know that the end of work only means the beginning of a short, restless sleep before you wake up to face another day. And another bowl of the exact same thing. The gruel is your life now. It is the tasteless, colorless landscape of your childhood. The week is a flat, gray expanse of time. A long corridor with walls made of work and a floor paved with hunger. But at the end of this corridor, there is a tiny, flickering candle of hope. Sunday, on Sunday, the machines fall silent. The relentless, bone-jarring roar of the factory ceases, and the sudden quiet is almost as disorienting as the noise itself. Sunday is the day of rest, a relative term, as you are often tasked with cleaning the machinery, but more importantly, it is the day the menu is supposed to change. Throughout the week, whispers of the Sunday dinner circulate among the children. It becomes a small legend, a focal point for all your desperate hopes for something, anything, different. The veterans, the children who have been here for years, speak of it with a cynical, weary air, but even they can't completely extinguish the spark of anticipation. When Sunday finally arrives, you are marched not into the usual dining hall, but sometimes to a local church, a trip that is less about spiritual salvation and more about the factory owner demonstrating his piety to the community. After the service, you are laid back for the promised feast. The air in the dining hall does smell different. There's a faint aroma of something roasting, a smell so foreign and delicious that it makes your stomach clench with a hunger so sharp it's painful. You line up, your tin bowl in hand, your heart thumping with a mixture of hope and dread. At the front of the line, the usual cauldron of gruel is gone. In its place are trays of something solid. As you get closer, you see it. Smooth, grayish cubes of boiled meat, swimming in a thin, greasy gravy, served alongside a lump of boiled potatoes. When the portion lands in your bowl, it looks like the most decadent meal you have ever seen. Meat, real, actual meat. You sit down at the bench, your hands trembling slightly. You ignore the potato for now and spear a piece of the meat with your spoon. You bring it to your mouth. The texture is stringy and tough. It takes a long time to chew, your jaw working hard to break down the resilient fibers. The flavor is disappointing. It's bland, with a slightly metallic taste. The gravy is just greasy water, adding a slick coating but no real flavor. It's a world away from the rich, savory stews you vaguely remember from a time before the factory. This was the reality of the much anticipated Sunday meal. The meat was almost always the cheapest, lowest quality cuts available. It was often unboiled for hours, the only cooking method that could render the tough, grist-like pieces remotely edible. The process would leach out most of the flavor and nutrients, leaving behind a mass of chewy protein. The source of this meat was also a subject of grim speculation. While some of it was just cheap cuts of beef or mutton, Persian factory records show contracts with knackers yards places that processed animals unfit for the regular market, including those that had died of disease. And what about the portion size? It was invariably tiny. A few small cubes of meat were meant to be a week's highlight. This practice is a fascinating, grim example of psychological manipulation in institutional settings. The concept of the Sunday treat is well documented. Providing a weekly, minor improvement in diet served several purposes. It gave the workers something to look forward to, a reason to endure the rest of the week's privations. It created a cyclical rhythm of deprivation and reward, which can be ineffective to love control, and it allowed the proprietors to claim they were providing a varied and generous diet. On paper, a weekly roast dinner sounded wholesome and benevolent, masking the reality of the daily semi-starvation. Sometimes, the treat wasn't meat at all. It might be a soup pudding, a dense, heavy cannonball of flour and animal fat, boiled in a cloth. While incredibly heavy and hard to digest, it was packed with calories, a fact your body would greedily appreciate, even as your stomach groaned in protest. This is a strange paradox, historians note. Sometimes the treats were objectively less healthy than the monotonous gruel, but they were valued simply because they were different. The novelty itself was a form of nourishment for the spirit, if not the body. You slowly chew your way through the tough morsels of meat, making them last as long as possible. You eat the boiled potato, which is watery and under-seasoned, but still a welcome change from the unending slurry of gruel. You use the last piece of your chalky bread to mop up every last drop of the greasy gravy from your bowl. When you are done, your stomach feels fuller than usual, a heavy, leaden fullness. It's not the pleasant satisfaction of a good meal, but the blunt sensation of having ingested dense matter. You look around at the other children. Some are slumped over, looking sleepy and lethargic. The sudden influx of hard-to-digest food, especially fat, into a system accustomed to watery, gruel often caused digestive upset, cramps, and drowsiness. The feast could be physically debilitating in its own way. Historians continue to debate the true purpose of this Sunday ritual. Was it a calculated act of psychological control? A carefully rationed dose of hope to keep the workforce compliant? Or was it a genuine, if misguided, attempt at Christian charity by factory owners who saw themselves as paternalistic figures, providing for their wards as best they could within a brutal economic framework? The truth is likely a murky combination of both. As the heavy meal settles in your stomach, you feel a profound sense of weariness. The brief flicker of hope has been extinguished, replaced by the familiar, dull reality. The feast was just another illusion, a slightly more elaborate version of the chalky bread and watered-down milk. It was the idea of a good meal, not the reality of one. And as you shuffle out of the dining hall into the quiet, gray Sunday afternoon, you know that in just a few hours, the bell will clang for the evening meal, and waiting for you will be a bowl of familiar, tasteless, honest gruel. The holiday is over. The long, gray week begins again. There is no money. The promise the man with the shiny boots made to your parents, the promise of wages sent home, was a carefully constructed lie. You work 16 hours a day, your small hands darting among the clattering, dangerous machinery. But at the end of the week, your own hands remained empty. Instead of coins, you are sometimes given a small slip of paper or a metal token. This is grip, or what's known as truck. And it is, you soon learn, a chain more subtle, but just as strong as any made of iron. These tokens are worthless outside the factory walls. You can't use them at the market in the nearby town. Not that you're ever allowed to go there. You can't save them. You certainly can't send them home. They have value in only one place on earth. The company store. The company store, or tummy shop, is usually a small, dark room located on the factory grounds. It's run by the factory owner, or more often, by one of his relatives or cronies. It stocks a few meager luxuries, things you dream about as you choke down your daily gruel. A small, withered apple, a sticky-looking sweet, perhaps a meat pie of questionable origin. And it is here that you see the true genius of the system's cruelty. You clutch your token, the first one you've ever been given, perhaps as a reward for a week without any mistakes. The hunger inside you is a living creature, and it screams for something, anything, other than gruel. You enter the small shop. The air is stuffy and smells faintly of stale sugar and damp wood. Behind the counter stands the proprietor, a man with a ledger and a perpetually sour expression. You point a trembling finger at a small, lumpy biscuit. It looks dry and unappetizing, but it's not gruel. The shopkeeper names a price. It seems impossibly high, a price that uses up your entire token. But what choice do you have? You hand over the token. He sweeps it into a drawer and gives you the biscuit. You hurry away to a corner to eat it before anyone can try to take it from you. It's hard and stale, and it tastes mostly of old flour. But the faint hint of sweetness from a few embedded currants is an explosion of flavor on your deprived palate. It's gone in 3 bites, and so is your week's wages. This was the infamous drug system. It was a method of paying workers with credit or tokens that could only be redeemed at a store owned by their employer. This system was devastatingly effective for the owners. First, it eliminated the need for actual cash, which was often in short supply. Second, it created a captive market. Workers had no choice but to shop at the company store, where the owner could set the prices as high as he wanted, with no competition. The quality of the goods was invariably abysmal, and the prices were outrageously inflated. A loaf of bread that might cost a penny in town would cost 2 or 3 pence in the Tommy shop. The system was also a powerful tool for creating debt and dependency. An adult worker with a family might find that his scrip wasn't enough to buy the basic food his family needed from the company's store. So, the store owner would generously offer him credit. This debt would be deducted from his future earnings, trapping him in a cycle of debt peonage. He could never leave his job, because he always owed money to his employer. For a child like you, it's simpler. The system just claws back the pittance you've earned, ensuring you remain completely dependent on the factory for your survival. This practice became so exploitative and widespread that it led to significant social unrest. The Truck Acts were a series of laws passed by the British Parliament throughout the 19th century, starting as early as 1831, specifically to outlaw this form of payment and mandate that workers be paid in actual currency. The very existence of these laws, and the fact that they had to be repeatedly passed and strengthened, shows how deeply entrenched and profitable the system was. There's a debate among economic historians about the true nature of the truck system. Was it pure, cynical exploitation from the start? Or did it begin as a practical solution in remote industrial areas where there were no other shops or banking facilities? Some argue that in the early days of the Industrial Revolution, setting up a company store was a logistical necessity. But even if it started with a practical purpose, the potential for abuse was too great, and in most cases, it quickly devolved into a mechanism for profit gouging and worker control. The road to exploitation is oft unpaved with practical intentions. You never get another token. That biscuit was a one-time incentive. You return to the daily reality of just the factory-provided meals. But you've seen the trap now. You've seen the older workers, the ones with families who live in the slum tenements outside the factory walls, shuffling into the Tommy shop, their faces etched with a weary resignation. You see them hand over their scrip for a bag of chalky flour or a few rotting potatoes, their wages vanishing before they've even touched them. You realize the truth. You are not a worker. You are not earning a living. You are a piece of machinery. Like the looms you tend, you are fed just enough to keep you running. And the idea that you are being paid for your labor is the most elaborate and cruel joke of all. The factory takes your time, your health, your childhood, and in return, it gives you a token that it immediately takes back. It's a closed loop of exploitation, as perfectly designed and as relentless as the steam engine that powers the whole operation. The hunger is a constant companion. It's a dull, hollow ache that lies in your belly, a fire that the watery gruel can never truly extinguish. Some days, it sharpens into a gnawing pain so intense it's hard to think of anything else. It distracts you from your work, making your fingers clumsy and your mind slow. A moment of inattention at the machines can cost you a finger. Or worse, the overseer's anger is swift and painful, but the hunger is worse. It is a more patient and relentless tormentor. And so, you become a scavenger. This isn't a choice. It's an instinct, an imperative driven by a body screaming for more calories, more nutrients, more anything. Your senses, dulled by the monotony of the factory, become sharp again, but they are retuned for a new purpose. Your eyes are no longer looking for friends or for beauty. They are constantly scanning the ground, the corners, the spaces where things are forgotten or thrown away. The factory yard becomes your hunting ground. You learn the routes of the carts that bring supplies and take away finished goods. Sometimes, a sack of grain might have a small hole, leaving a trail of precious oats or wheat on the cobblestones. You learn to spot these little spills from a distance. When no one is looking, you dart out and scoop up the grains with your dirty fingers, cramming them into your mouth before you can be caught. They are raw and hard on your teeth, but they have a nutty, substantial flavor that feels like life itself. You stash a few in your pocket, a secret treasure to be chewed on later, one grain at a time, to make the sensation last. The true prizes are found in the city as refuse. On the rare occasions you are sent on an errand outside the factory gates, or during the brief, bleak hour of free time on a Sunday afternoon, you join the other spectral children who haunt the alleyways behind the taverns and the kitchens of the wealthy. The city as garbage is a universe of smells, mostly foul, but your nose learns to pick out the scent of discarded food. You find things that would have made you wretched just a few months ago. A pile of oyster shells, which you crack open and lick, hoping for a tiny, salty morsel left behind. The tough, outer leaves of a cabbage, wilted and dirty, but still crunchy and green. The holy grail is a discarded apple core, which might still have a few bites of sweet, crisp flesh clinging to the seeds. You eat it all. Seeds, stem, and all. You find fish heads and bones, which you gnaw on for any scrap of meat. This is a world of fierce competition. You are not the only one looking. You compete with other desperate children, with the stray dogs that roam the streets, and with the rats that are everywhere. A find must be eaten quickly, guardedly, before it can be snatched away. You learn to be fast and invisible. This level of desperation is well documented in the social commentary of the era. Writers like Henry Mayhew, in his monumental work London Labyrinth, The London Poor, chronicled the lives of the city's underclass in meticulous detail. He described the mudlarks, children who scavenged the banks of the Thames at low tide for anything of value, scraps of coal, old rope, or lost coins. But he also wrote of the pure finders who collected dog manure to sell to tanneries, and of the children who survived almost entirely on what they could find in the garbage heaps. They were a visible, yet ignored, part of the urban landscape. One of the more bizarre and poignant details from these accounts is the concept of flavor. Sometimes, the butcher might discard a bone with almost no meat left on it. Poor families would buy these bones for a pittance, or find them in the trash, and boil them for hours and hours. They would boil them repeatedly, trying to extract every last molecule of fat and gelatin to create a thin, weak soup they called bone broth. A single bone might be used by multiple families, passed down the social ladder until it was literally just a piece of white calcium, having given up all its ghosts of flavor. This relentless pursuit of the mere memory of taste is a powerful testament to the depth of their deprivation. Of course, this way of eating is incredibly dangerous. You have no way of knowing why the food was thrown away. Was it simply scraps? Or was it spoiled? You take the risk. You eat a piece of meat pie crust you find in a gutter and spend the next day doubled over with cramps, your stomach churning. You develop a constant, low-grade sickness that you learn to live with. Food poisoning is not a dramatic, isolated event. It's a chronic condition, a background noise of nausea and digestive distress. Historians debate the impact of this unofficial diet on the overall health of the laboring poor. Did the scavenged scraps, however contaminated, provide crucial micronutrients missing from the official institutional diet? Could a wilted cabbage leaf have provided a touch of vitamin C that prevented the worst ravages of scurvy? It's a difficult question to answer. It's possible that for some, this desperate foraging made the marginal difference between survival and succumbing to a deficiency disease. But it's just as likely that the constant exposure to bacterial toxins from spoiled food did more harm than good, contributing to the high rates of dysentery, cholera, and other infectious diseases that plague the slums. You are huddled in a cold, damp alleyway, the sounds of a nearby tavern laughter and music drifting over the wall. It's a sound from another universe. In your hands, you hold your prize for the day, a half-eaten potato, dropped by a careless passerby. It's cold and gritty with street dirt, but it's solid. It's real. You wipe it on your sleeve, the ruffle doing little to clean it. You take a bite. The starchy, earthy taste fills your mouth. For a brief, glorious moment, the gnawing fire in your belly is banked. It's a fleeting victory in a never-ending war. You finish the potato in the shadows, a small, hunched figure fueled by the city's leftovers, hoping it will be enough to get you through another day. The hunger is a powerful force. It can make you brave, and it can make you reckless. In the bleak landscape of the factory, the line between scavenging and stealing is a blurry one, and one you are constantly tempted to cross. You see opportunities everywhere. A loaf of the chalky bread left unattended on a table. A sack of potatoes in the kitchen yard, temporarily unguarded. The ultimate prize would be to sneak into the company store, to grab something, anything, from its shelves. The fantasies are vivid and detailed. You plot them in your mind as you stand at the loom, the repetitive motions of your work freeing your thoughts to wander down these dangerous paths. But you are held back by fear. The consequences of being caught are swift, brutal, in public. They are designed not just to punish the offender, but to serve as a terrifying lesson to everyone else. One day, you see it happen. A boy, not much older than you, has been caught. His name is Thomas, and you've sometimes shared a bench with him at mealtimes. He is quiet and has a cough that never seems to go away. His crime: he was caught trying to steal a handful of raw carrots from a crate being delivered to the main house of the factory owner. He was seen by an overseer. There is no trial, no discussion. The entire workforce of the factory, children and adults alike, disassembled in the main yard. The work stops. The silence that falls is heavy and expectant. Thomas is dragged to the center of the yard by two large men. He is sobbing, his face pale with terror. The factory owner himself comes out to preside over the punishment. He is a large man in a clean suit, and he speaks about the importance of honesty and the evils of theft, his voice ringing with a hypocrisy so profound it feels like a physical presence. Thomas is tied to a wooden post. His shirt is pulled off, exposing his thin, pale back. The overseer, the same one who caught him, steps forward. In his hand is a short, thick leather strap. He raises it high and brings it down. The sound is sickening, a sharp crack that echoes across the silent yard. Thomas screams, "Ahoy!" Thin sound of pure agony. A red line appears on his back. The overseer raises the strap again and again. The boy's screams dissolve into choked sobs. You stand frozen, forced to what? You want to look away, but you can't. The overseer's gaze sweeps across the crowd of children, daring any of you to turn your head. This is for you. This is the lesson. This kind of corporal punishment was standard practice. In an era before modern policing and a formal juvenile justice system, discipline within institutions like factories, workhouses, and even schools was maintained through direct physical violence. The master or owner held immense power over his apprentices and workers, a power that often included the legal right to administer correction. The accounts of factory reformers like Richard Dostally and John Fielden are filled with horrific stories of children being beaten for the smallest infractions, for being late, for talking, for dropping a tool, and especially for stealing food. A particularly grim and lesser-known fact is the variety of implements used for this correction. It wasn't just a simple cane or strap. Overseers often used whatever was at hand. There are documented cases of children being beaten with iron bars, with pieces of machinery like rollers or spindles. The beatings were not just about punishment. They were about terror, about asserting absolute authority in the most visceral way possible. After what feels like an eternity, the beating stops. Thomas is a crumpled, weeping heap at the base of the post. He is cut down and dragged away. Back towards the dormitory, the factory owner says a few final words about gratitude and discipline, then turns and walks back to his house. The overseers shout at everyone to get back to work. The moment of silent, collective horror is broken. The great machine of the factory roars back to life. But something has changed. The lesson has been learned. Your own secret plans of pilfering a potato or a piece of bread now seem like the fantasies of a fool. The risk is too great. The reward of a few mouthfuls of food is not worth the certainty of that searing pain, that absolute humiliation. Historians still debate the efficacy of such brutal methods. Did this kind of public, ritualized punishment actually deter theft and enforce discipline? Or did it simply breed a deeper, more silent resentment and a more cunning kind of disobedience? Some argue that while it may have prevented overt acts of rebellion, it created a workforce that was compliant only out of fear, not loyalty, leading to shoddy work, quiet sabotage, and a complete breakdown of trust. The factory was not a community. It was a prison camp, ruled by the threat of violence. Later that night, in the dark, crowded dormitory, you can hear Thomas crying softly in his bunk. The other children are silent, pretending to be asleep. No one goes to him. No one offers a word of comfort. Fear is isolating. The punishment has not just broken Thomas' skin, it has fractured the fragile, unspoken bonds between all of you. To associate with him now is to draw unwanted attention to yourself. Everyone is alone with their own hunger and their own fear. You lie on your hard mattress, the phantom crack of the leather strap still echoing in your ears. You clench your fists under the thin, scratchy blanket. The hunger is still there, a cold knot in your stomach. But now, it is mixed with a new, more powerful emotion, a cold, quiet rage. You understand now that the factory doesn't just steal your labor and your health. It tries to steal your courage, too, and the price of a single stolen carrot is a piece of your own humanity. In the dead of the afternoon, when the fatigue is at its worst and the monotonous rhythm of the machinery has lulled you into a state of near hypnosis, a different kind of ration is sometimes distributed. It's meant to be a restorative, a small boost to get you through the final, grueling hours of the shift. A boy comes around with a large, steaming urn, sloshing the dirt, hot liquid into the tin cups of the workers. This, you are told, as tea. The warmth of the cup in your cold hands is a comfort in itself. For a moment, you feel a flicker of something almost human. Tea is what adults drink. It feels sophisticated. You lift the cup and breathe in the steam. It smells vaguely of tannins and something else, something dusty and slightly bitter, like burnt leaves. You take a sip. It's hot and watery, with a wheat, astringent flavor that coats your tongue. There is no richness, no fragrant aroma of real tea. It's a pale, brown ghost of a beverage. There is no milk, of course, and certainly no sugar. It's just hot, bitter water. Yet, you drink it gratefully. The heat itself feels like a form of energy, seeping into your chilled bones and offering a moment's respite from the damp, drafty air of the factory floor. You are drinking the dregs of the tea industry, another masterpiece of 19th century food adulteration. Tea was an expensive commodity, especially in the early part of the century, subject to heavy taxes. The beverage that trickled down to the poorest workers was often a fraudulent concoction designed to mimic the real thing at a fraction of the cost. The process of creating this fake tea was an industry in itself. One common practice was to use SMH, a substance made from the leaves of other plants sash, sloe, or elder which word ride, rolled, and sometimes colored with black lead or other toxic dyes to resemble real tea leaves. These would then be mixed with a small amount of low-grade, spent tea to give it a faint, authentic scent. Even more common was the recycling of used tea leaves. Enterprising individuals would go to the back doors of hotels, restaurants, and the homes of the wealthy to buy their used tea leaves. These soggy, flavorless leaves would be taken back to clandestine workshops, where they would be dried out on hot copper plates, a process that often added a metallic, poisonous taint to the final product. To restore some of their dark color, they were faced with a mixture of graphite, black wood, Prussian blue, or even sheep's tongue. The finished product, a bag of dried, dyed, and possibly toxic leaves, was then sold cheaply to institutions like factories and workhouses. You are, in essence, drinking someone else's garbage. This recycling of tea leaves is a fascinating, if disgusting, little corner of economic history. It created a whole secondary market, a shadow economy based on waste. There were even parliamentary inquiries into the practice. In one famous investigation, a man was found to have built a thriving business by collecting used leaves from London's coffee houses, ray-drying and dyeing them, and then selling them back to the same coffee houses as fresh tea. It was a perfectly closed loop of fraud. You swallow another mouthful of the hot, bitter liquid. Does it help? In a way, yes. The caffeine content, even from spent leaves, is not zero. It provides a small, jittery jolt to your exhausted system. It's a chemical kick that temporarily sharpens your focus and staves off the heavy-lidded drowsiness that is your constant state. For the overseers, this is the entire point. The tea isn't for your comfort or enjoyment. It is a tool of productivity, a cheap way to wring a few more hours of attentive labor out of a physically depleted workforce. Historians debate the true physiological impact of this kind of beverage. While it provided a momentary stimulant, what were the long-term effects of ingesting low levels of lead and other toxic dyes on a daily basis? For a developing child's body, already weakened by malnutrition and overwork, the cumulative effect could have been devastating, contributing to chronic health problems that were likely never diagnosed or understood. The tea break was a restorative pause. It was a small, routine poisoning, a trade-off of long-term health for short-term alertness. You finish your cup. The bitter aftertaste lingers in your mouth. The warmth in your hands fades. But a slight tremor, a nervous energy, now runs through you. The fog of fatigue has lifted just enough for you to face the final stretch of the workday. You look at the giant, spinning gears of the loom, the blur of the spindles. They seem a little clearer now. The boy has collected your empty cup, and the brief interruption is over. You return to your work. Your movements a little faster, a little jerkier than before. The tea is working. It has done its job. It has sharpened the tool. You are the tool. And as you re-engage with the relentless rhythm of the machine, you are fueled not by nutrition, but by a weak, dirty, second-hand stimulant. It's just another way the factory finds to run you on empty, to keep you going long after you should have stopped. Food is not just fuel here. You learn this lesson not at the dining table, but on the factory floor. Food, or more precisely, the lack of it, is a tool. It is a language of power, a system of reward and punishment far more immediate and visceral than the beatings. It is a weapon wielded by the overseers with chilling precision. The rules are simple and unspoken. You learn them by observation. If you meet your quota for the day, if your work is fast and clean, you get your full ration. You get the bowl of gruel, the block of chalky bread. It's a meager price, but it's everything. It's the baseline for survival. But if you are slow, your mind wandering from fatigue, your fingers fumbling, the consequences are felt directly in your stomach. The overseer, a hulking figure who seems to be able to watch everyone at once, will mark your name down in his little book. At mealtime, when you hold out your bowl, the woman with the ladle will either give you a half portion, or worse, shake her head and wave you past. You get nothing. The first time this happens to you, the panic is a cold fist in your gut. It was a bad day. You were dizzy, and a thread snapped on the loom, and it took you too long to fix it. Now you stand by the bench, empty-handed, and watch the others eat. The sight of the gray, tasteless gruel you normally despise suddenly seems like the most desirable feast in the world. The hunger, which is always present, now becomes a roaring, all-consuming void. Your stomach cramps, and a wave of dizziness washes over you. You have to work the entire next shift on an empty stomach. It is a special kind of hell. This use of food as a disciplinary tool is one of the most brutal aspects of the factory and workhouse system. It was systematic, codified, and considered perfectly normal. Workhouse records, which have been studied extensively by historians, often contain detailed dietary plans that explicitly link food rations to behavior and work output. They had different scales of diet. The standard diet for a compliant, able-bodied worker, a slightly better diet, perhaps with a rare piece of cheese or a larger bread ration, for those who exceeded expectations, and a punishment diet, which might consist of nothing but bread and water for days on end, for those who were disobedient or unproductive. This turned every meal into a moment of judgment. The dining hall was not a place of rest. It was a courtroom where your day's worth was publicly announced. The shame of being denied food was almost as painful as the hunger itself. It marked you as a failure in front of your peers. A strange and little-known perversion of this system was the use of treats as a form of bribery. Sometimes, an owner would want a particularly unpleasant or dangerous job done quickly, clearing a blockage from deep within a machine. For instance, a job for which a child's small body was uniquely suited. To encourage volunteers, an overseer might offer a reward, a meat pie from the company's store, or a sticky bun. You would see children, desperate for a taste of real food, eagerly risk their limbs or even their lives for a single sweet pastry. It was a terrifyingly effective way to make people complicit in their own exploitation. You learn to fear the overseer's little book more than the strap. The pain of a beating is intense, but it fades. The pain of a full day of gnawing, debilitating hunger is a slow, grinding misery that weakens your body and breaks your will. You push yourself harder. Your fingers fly faster. You ignore the dizziness, the spots that swim before your eyes. You force yourself to concentrate, your entire being focused on one simple goal: earning your gruel. The morality of this practice is something legal and social historians continue to grapple with. Was this starvation as punishment considered torture? By today's standards, absolutely. But in the context of the 19th century, the lines were much blurrier. The prevailing philosophy, particularly in relation to the poor, was that hardship was a necessary motivator. The less eligibility principle, which governed the new Poor Law of 1834, explicitly stated that conditions inside a workhouse had to be worse than the conditions of the lowest paid independent laborer outside. This was meant to discourage people from seeking public assistance. This same harsh logic applied within the factory walls. Hunger was seen as a legitimate tool to enforce labor discipline, a natural consequence for those who failed to contribute. You see the effect this has on the children around you. It fosters a desperate, individualistic survival instinct. There is no solidarity. You can't afford to help the girl next to you who is struggling with her machine, because her slowness might drag down the output of your section, putting every honest ration at risk. The system pits you against each other. You are all rivals in a daily contest for calories. One evening, after being denied your meal, you lie awake in your bunk, your stomach aching so badly you can't sleep. You listen to the sounds of the dormitory, the coughs, the whimpers, the quiet snores of those lucky enough to have eaten. You are utterly alone in your misery. The factory has found the most efficient way to control you. It doesn't need to put you in chains. It has chained your body to its own desperate biological needs. Your hunger is your leash, and the overseer holds the other end. You close your eyes and pray for sleep to come, because in sleep, for a few brief hours, you don't have to feel it. Your body is keeping a silent record of every inadequate meal. It's a ledger written in aches, in weaknesses, in maladies that you don't have the words to name. The diet of watery gruel, chalky bread, and chemical tea is not just failing to build you up. It's actively breaking you down. You are in a constant state of food sickness, a term that encompasses the whole spectrum of ailments born from malnutrition. It starts with your teeth. You have a constant dull ache in your jaw. Your gums are soft and puffy, and they bleed sometimes when you chew on the hard, gritty bread. You see the older children with teeth that are loose, or missing entirely. This is likely scurvy, a disease we now associate with sailors on long voyages, but which was rampant among the urban poor. They die utterly devoid of fresh fruits and vegetables means a severe deficiency in vitamin C, a crucial component for tissue repair. Your body is literally failing to hold itself together properly. Then there are your bones. You feel a deep ache in your legs, especially at night. Your back constantly hurts. You see other children whose legs are strangely bowed, or whose spines are beginning to curve. This is rickets, a condition caused by a lack of vitamin D and calcium. Vitamin D is the sunshine vitamin, but you spend all the daylight hours inside the loud, dark factory, and the sky outside is choked with smoke. The watered down, Jackie milk provides none of the calcium your growing bones desperately need. So, your skeleton, the very frame of your body, is growing soft and misshapen under the strain of long hours standing and working. Your skin is a map of your poor health. It's pale and pasty, small cuts and scrapes from the machinery. What should heal in a few days linger for weeks. They often become red, swollen, and hot to the touch, oozing a pale fluid. These are infections. Your immune system, starved of the proteins and vitamins it needs to function, is too weak to fight off the constant assault of germs from the filthy environment. Many children have persistent rashes and skin conditions, a collective testimony to their body's failing defenses. And there is the constant, humiliating digestive distress. Your stomach is either cramping from hunger, or bloated and uncomfortable from the indigestible fillers in the bread. You suffer from alternating bouts of constipation and diarrhea, the latter being particularly dangerous as it drains your body of what little water and nutrients it has. There is no privacy in the latrines, just a row of crude toilets that empty into a common cesspit. Sickness is a public, shared misery, one of the more obscure, inside. Consequences of this diet was a condition known as SCR of Euler. It was a form of tuberculosis that affected the lymph nodes, particularly in the neck, causing them to swell into large, unpleasant lumps. It was so common among the poor that it was nicknamed King's Evil, from an ancient belief that it could be cured by the touch of a monarch. The link between this specific disease and malnutrition was well understood by some doctors of the period, who noted it was most prevalent in badly fed and housed populations. It was, quite literally, a disease of poverty. You watch as children get sick and simply fade. I cough that starts as a minor annoyance deepens into a rattling, persistent ache. The child gets thinner, paler. They start missing shifts. One day, they are taken to the infirmary, a small, grim room you are all terrified of, and often they don't come back. There are no announcements, no memorials. Their bunk is simply empty one morning, and by evening, a new, terrified child from the countryside has taken their place. The factory consumes children as surely as it consumes coal. The historical debate here centers on the inevitability of this situation. Were these high rates of disease and mortality an unavoidable consequence of rapid urbanization and industrialization before the age of modern medicine and nutritional science? Or were they the direct result of a system of deliberate neglect and exploitation? Many factory owners and apologists of the era would have argued the former. They saw disease as a natural, almost Malthusian check on the population. But reformers and early public health advocates argued vehemently for the latter. They collected data, linking specific diseases to specific conditions, typhoid to dirty water, rickets to the lack of sunlight, and poor diet, proving that these were not acts of God, but failures of man. You feel a new kind of pain in your stomach one afternoon, sharper than the usual hunger pangs. A wave of nausea washes over you, and you know you are going to be sick. You barely make it to the waste bucket in the corner of the room before you vomit up the morning's ration of gruel. It comes up as a thin, acidic, watery mess. There was nothing of substance in it to begin with. The overseer glares at you, angry at the interruption. He doesn't see a sick child. He sees a defective piece of equipment. He shouts at you to get back to your station. You stumble back to the loom, your body trembling, your mouth tasting of bile. You lean against the machine for support, trying to will the world to stop spinning. The sickness is not a temporary bug. It's the food itself, the entire system, working its way through you. Your body is rejecting the fuel it's being given, because it's not fuel at all. It's poison, administered in slow, daily doses, and you realize with a terrifying clarity that there is no escape from it. You are trapped inside a body that is being starved and sickened from the inside out. There are moments, rare and fleeting, when you catch a glimpse of another world, a world of color, of flavor, of unimaginable abundance. These moments usually happen through glass. Sometimes you are sent on an errand that takes you through a different part of the city, away from the grimy warren of factories and tenements. You walk through wider streets, where the air is marginally cleaner and the buildings are made of pale, clean stone instead of soot-stained brick. And here, you find the windows. There is the baker's window. You stop and stare, mesmerized. It's a universe away from the gray, gritty blocks of bread you are given. Here, loaves are plump and golden brown, dusted with a fine white flour. There are pastries glistening with sugar glazes, buns studded with dark, plum raisins, and cakes decorated with swirls of white cream. The light from inside the shop makes them glow like treasure. You can almost smell them through the thick pane of glass, a warm, sweet, yeasty aroma that is so intoxicating it makes you feel dizzy. You press your forehead against the cold glass, leaving a small, smudgy eye patch. The people inside, women in fine bonnets and men in tall hats, point at what they want. And the baker, a cheerful-looking man in a white apron, wraps their purchases in clean paper. They pay with shiny coins. They don't know how lucky they are. Then there is the butcher's window. Hanging from hooks are whole sides of beef, legs of lamb, and plump chickens. The meat is a deep, rich red, marbled with clean, white fat. There are strings of fat, pale sausages and thick slabs of bacon. It's a display of raw, magnificent protein, an entire gallery of everything your body is screaming for. It looks nothing like the gray, stringy cubes of boiled mystery meat you get on Sundays. This is real food, in a quantity you can barely comprehend. But the most magical window of all belongs to the confectioner. It's a wonderland of impossible colors and shapes. There are tall glass jars filled with striped humbugs, brightly colored fruit drops, and twisted sticks of barley sugar. There are squares of dark, rich-looking chocolate and delicate, pastel-colored bonbons. Sugar, for you, is a forgotten rumor, a phantom taste from a life before this one. To see it displayed in such vast, sparkling quantities feels like looking at a king's ransom of jewels. You see a wealthy child, holding her mother's hand, come out of the shop licking a brightly colored lollipop. the sight is so alien, so deeply unfair, that it feels like a physical blow. This stark visual contrast between the food of the rich and the food of the poor was a defining feature of the Victorian city. The development of plate glass in the 19th century allowed for the creation of large shop windows, turning the act of shopping into a form of public theater. Food was no longer just sold. It was displayed, advertised, and turned into a spectacle of desire. For the wealthy, it was a source of pleasure and choice. For the poor, it was a constant, painful reminder of everything they could not have. A little-known aspect of this is the moral judgment that often accompanied these displays. The prevailing middle-class ideology, heavily influenced by thinkers like Samuel Smiles and his book Self-Help, promoted the idea that wealth and poverty were direct results of an individual's virtue and character. A wealthy person could afford these fine foods because they were hardworking, thrifty, and morally upright. A poor person was hungry because they were lazy, profligate, or drunk. Therefore, your hunger, as you stare through the window, is not a social problem. It is a personal failing. The window is not just a barrier of glass and economics. It is a moral divider. Historians debate the psychological impact of this constant visual temptation. Did it inspire revolution and resentment, as Karl Marx would argue, making the class divisions so stark that they would inevitably lead to conflict? Or did it, for many, inspire aspiration and a desire to emulate the rich? It's possible it did both. It could fuel a deep, burning anger in some, while for others, the dream of one day being able to walk into that baker's shop and buy a cake was a powerful, if distant, motivator. You are shooed away from the window by the shopkeeper, who raps on the glass and makes an angry gesture. You are dirty. You are ragged. And you are spoiling the view for his real customers. You pull your thin shawl around you and hurry away. The glorious images of the food burned into your mind. The memory of what you saw makes your evening meal of gruel taste even more desolate. The bland, gray paste in your bowl is an insult to the memory of the golden bread and the glistening pastries. The fantasy of food, which used to be a small comfort, is now a source of fresh pain. You've seen what you are missing. You have looked through the window into paradise. And now your own personal hell feels darker and deeper than ever before. You eat your gruel in silence, the vibrant colors from the shop windows swirling in your mind's eye. The gap between your world and theirs is not just a street or a pane of glass. It's an entire universe of experience. And you are on the wrong side of it. The factory is a brutal world, but you hear whispers of a place that is even worse. A place governed by rules so rigid and a diet so scientifically meager that it makes your own ration seem almost generous. This place is the Workhouse, the Bastille, as the poor call it, a reference to the infamous French prison. It is the ultimate threat, the place you are told you'll end up if you are too sick to work, or if the factory decides you are no longer useful. You learn about it from an older boy who spent 6 months in a parish workhouse before being sold. The term feels more accurate than sent to the factory. He speaks of it in a low, hushed voice in the dark of the dormitory, as if the walls themselves are listening. The workhouse, he tells you, is all about the rules. Everything is a rule. When you wake, when you sleep, when you eat, when you speak. Families are broken up the moment they enter. Husbands are sent to one wing, wives to another, and children to a third. You might live in the same building as your mother and father for years and never see them except for a brief, supervised meeting on Sundays. The clothes you arrive in are taken away, and you are given a rough, scratchy uniform that is the same as everyone else's. Your name is taken away. In a sense, You are an inmate, but it is the food he describes that fills you with a special kind of dread. The workhouse diet was not just cheap, it was a matter of public policy, a science of calculated misery. Under the new Poor Law of 1834, the diet was intentionally designed to be less eligible, less desirable than the diet of the poorest independent laborer. The goal was to make the workhouse so unpleasant that people would do anything to avoid it. The boy describes a menu of terrifying monotony. It was a strict weekly rotation, the same meal on the same day. Every week, for years, breakfast was always gruel, like yours, but perhaps even thinner. Dinner might be bread and a lump of hard, flavorless cheese, or on a good day, a watery soup made from boiled bones and a few vegetables. Supper was often just more bread and gruel. There was no variation, no hope of a surprise, no chance of a treat unless it was written into the official dietary table for a holiday like Christmas. The portions were tiny, measured out to the ounce with a terrifying precision. The workhouse masters had charts, issued by the Central Poor Law Commission, that dictated exactly how many ounces of bread or pints of gruel a man, woman, or child should receive. This is one of the most chillingly bureaucratic aspects of the system. The starvation of the poor was not a chaotic accident. It was planned, documented, and officially sanctioned in government ledgers. One of the lesser known, and truly bizarre, details of this system was the flour and water punishment diet. If an inmate broke a rule, spoke out of turn, was found to be lazy, they could be put on a restricted diet for a period of several days. This often consisted of nothing but a few ounces of bread and water per day. Some workhouses, however, had a special punishment concoction, a paste made of nothing but raw flour and cold water. It was a sticky, indigestible, and utterly disgusting substance, designed to be as unpleasant as possible while still technically counting as food. The most famous story to come out of the workhouse system is, of course, a fictional one, but it captured a profound truth. In Charles Dickens' S. Oliver Twist, the young hero famously asks for more gruel. "Please, sir, I want some more." This scene resonated so deeply with the public because it articulated the central, unspoken crime of the workhouse, the deliberate and systematic starvation of children. The shock and outrage of the workhouse master in the novel was not an exaggeration. For a child to question the officially sanctioned ration was an act of rebellion, an affront to the entire system. Historians debate whether the workhouse system worked. Did it succeed in its stated goal of reducing the cost of poor relief and encouraging self-reliance? On a purely economic level, for a time, it did lower the tax burden in some parishes. But social historians argue the human cost was catastrophic. It criminalized poverty, destroyed families, and created a permanent, traumatized underclass. It was a system that valued bureaucratic efficiency over human decency, and the dietary regulations were the clearest expression of that philosophy. The boy in the bunk next to you shudders as he finishes his story. He says the factory is bad, but at least there is a kind of chaotic freedom to it. You can whisper to the person next to you. You can find a stray piece of grain in the yard. In the workhouse, he says, they watch you all the time. There is no hope of finding anything extra. There is only the official ration. And the silence, and the rules. You lie back on your mattress, the scratchy wool of your blanket suddenly feeling like a small comfort. Your life is hard. Your hunger is constant. But it is not the meticulously planned, so crushing hunger of the workhouse. The factory may be a prison, but the workhouse is something else. It is a machine for grinding down the human spirit. and its primary fuel is hopelessness. The fear of it is a powerful motivator. It makes you cling to your miserable existence in the factory, as if it were a privilege. And that, you realize, is exactly what the fear is designed to do. The days grind on, a relentless succession of gray meals and gray work, all blurred together by fatigue. The calendar of the outside world, with its seasons and holidays, barely seems to penetrate the factory walls. But once a year, a strange and magical disruption occurs. Christmas. You don't know it's coming from any official announcement. You feel it in the air. A subtle shift in the grim routine. Perhaps an overseer is slightly less harsh for a day or two. Perhaps you hear the faint sound of carols being sung in a distant street. A nervous, hopeful energy begins to bubble up among the children. On Christmas Day, the factory is silent. You are allowed to sleep in an hour later. A luxury so profound it feels disorienting. You are laid into the dining hall. And for once, the room has been decorated. A few boughs of holly and ivy are hung on the walls. Their green and red a startling splash of color in the monochrome world. The factory owner, often accompanied by his family, makes an appearance. He gives a short speech about the spirit of the season, about charity and goodwill. The irony of his words lost on no one, yet ignored by everyone in the hope of what is to come. And then, the Christmas dinner is served. It is the Sunday dinner, but magnified. There are larger portions of the boiled meat and potatoes. Sometimes there is even a slab of suet pudding, dense and dark with molasses, known as plum pudding, even though it rarely contains plums. It's a heavy, stodgy feast, and you eat until your stomach, unaccustomed to such a volume of food, aches in protest. But the true magic comes after the main meal. The tray is brought out, and on it are small, lumpy, brownish squares. The overseer walks down the line of benches, placing one small square into each child's outstretched hand. You look down at the object in your palm. It's hardened, slightly sticky. You bring it to your mouth and tentatively lick it. An explosion of pure, unadulterated sweetness floods your senses. It's a taste so intense, so unfamiliar, that it's almost shocking. Sugar, real sugar. It's a piece of hard toffee or boiled candy, made from sugar and butter. A rare and expensive treat. You don't chew it. You let it sit on your tongue, dissolving as slowly as possible, trying to make the sensation last for an eternity. You close your eyes, and for a moment, the grime and the noise and the hunger of the past year melt away, replaced by this single, perfect point of sweetness. This annual Christmas treat was a deeply ingrained tradition in Victorian institutions, from factories to workhouses to orphanages. It was a moment of carefully orchestrated benevolence, widely reported in local newspapers. Philanthropists and factory owners would be praised for their generosity, providing a festive meal for the unfortunate children under their care. It was excellent public relations, a way to display their Christian virtue and mask the reality of the other 364 days of the year. The nature of these treats is a fascinating footnote in food history. Sugar, while becoming cheaper throughout the 19th century, was still a luxury for the poor. A piece of candy was a significant indulgence. These boiled sweets were often the simplest and cheapest confection to produce, requiring little more than a pot, heat, sugar, and perhaps some treacle or butter for flavor. Their very hardness was a virtue. The hard candy lasted longer, prolonging the experience of pleasure. It was a small, calculated dose of joy. You look around and see the other children, each one lost in their own private world of sugary bliss. For a few precious minutes, there are no rivalries, no fear, just a shared, silent communion of taste. This small act of kindness, however calculated it may be, feels real in the moment. It's a temporary truce in the long war between you and the factory. Historians often debate the sincerity of this Christmas charity. Was it a genuine, if fleeting, expression of goodwill from owners who, despite their brutal business practices, still felt a sense of seasonal moral obligation? Or was it a more cynical act of social control, a safety valve to release the accumulated pressure of a year's worth of misery and privation, ensuring that the workforce returned to their posts in the new year with a renewed, if temporary, sense of gratitude? The answer, as with so many things in this era, is likely a complex and uncomfortable mixture of both. The factory owner may well have felt a warm glow of benevolence as he watched you eat his gifted pudding, genuinely believing in his own generosity, while simultaneously seeing it as a sound investment in the continued compliance of his workforce. The sweet, sugary warmth dissolves from your tongue, leaving only the memory. The meal is over. The owner and his family depart. The holly will be taken down tomorrow. The brief, magical interruption has ended, but something has been rekindled inside you. The taste of the sugar is more than just a physical sensation. It's a reminder. It's proof that a world of pleasure and kindness, however distant, still exists. It's a tiny seed of hope planted in the barren soil of your daily life. You might stash a small, sticky piece of the candy in your pocket, wrapped in a scrap of cloth. In the coming weeks, in moments of deep despair, you might take it out and just lick it. Not enough to consume it, but just enough to bring back the memory of that one sweet, beautiful moment. It's a talisman against the gray. It won't fill your stomach, but in a strange way, it helps to feed your soul, giving you just enough strength to face the long, unsweetened year ahead. Thirst is a different kind of torment from hunger. It's sharper, more urgent. A human can survive for weeks without food, but only a few days without water. In the factory, water is always available, but you quickly learn that availability is not the same as safety. There are large barrels of water placed at various points on the factory floor, with a communal tin dipper hanging from a hook on the side. When the thirst becomes unbearable from the heat of the machines, the dust-filled air, and the sheer physical exertion, you rush to one of these barrels. You scoop up a dipper FUL of the cool liquid and drink it down in greedy gulps. The water has a taste. It's not the clean, crisp, slightly earthy taste of the water from the well back home. This water has a faint metallic tang, a slightly brackish and unpleasant flavor. Sometimes it's cloudy, with tiny specks of sediment swirling in it. But it is wet, and it is cool, and it quenches the immediate, burning fire in your throat, so you drink it without complaint. You have no idea where this water comes from. You, and millions like you in the sprawling industrial cities, are drinking from a deeply contaminated source. The very rivers that powered the factories and provided the water for drinking were also the city's primary sewers and industrial drains. Imagine the river as it flows towards your city. Upstream, other towns and factories are already using it. They are dumping their untreated sewage, their industrial waste chemicals, dyes, heavy metals directly into the current. By the time the river reaches your factory, it is already a toxic soup. Your factory's water intake pipe might be just a few hundred yards upstream from its own waste outflow pipe, and just a few yards downstream from that, another factory is doing the exact same thing. It was a cycle of communal contamination on a massive scale. The science connecting contaminated water to disease was still in its infancy. In the early part of the 19th century, The prevailing theory for how diseases like cholera and typhoid spread was the miasma theory. People believed that these sicknesses were caused by bad air, foul smells rising from garbage and sewage. While not entirely wrong, bad smells often indicate the presence of unsanitary conditions. They missed the true culprit: microorganisms in the water. The story of John Snow and the Broad Street Pump in London in 1854 is the most famous turning point in this public health drama. During a severe cholera outbreak, Snow meticulously mapped the cases and realized they were all clustered around a single public water pump. He persuaded the local authorities to remove the handle from the pump. Then the outbreak in that area immediately subsided. He had proved that cholera was a waterborne disease. But this was a revolutionary idea, and it took decades for it to be fully accepted by the scientific community and for governments to invest in the massive, expensive infrastructure of separate sewer systems and clean water supplies. For you in the factory, long before these reforms, you are living in the miasma theory world. The water might look and taste a bit off, but as long as it doesn't smell too foul, it's considered acceptable. No one understands that the most dangerous contaminants are invisible. A strange and little known detail of this era is the rise of water tasting as a skill. Before chemical analysis was common, engineers and public officials would often judge a water source simply by its brightness, taste, and smell. There are official reports where a city's water supply is declared wholesome based on this purely sensory and utterly unreliable assessment. So you drink the tainted water, and your body suffers the consequences. You are in a constant state of low-grade gastrointestinal distress. The cramps and diarrhea that you blame on the food are just as likely caused by the water. You and the other children are constantly reinfecting yourselves from the communal dipper, passing around pathogens as freely as you pass the time. When a major outbreak of disease hits the city, it spreads through the factory like wildfire, because the very water you drink to survive is the vehicle for the illness. The historical debate around this is a complex one of liability. Who is to blame for the poisoned water? The factory owner, for providing it; the city, for not building proper sanitation; the upstream factories, for polluting the river. The truth is that it was a catastrophic systemic failure. The population of cities had exploded so rapidly that infrastructure couldn't keep up. The technology and the political will to solve the problem lagged far behind the scale of the crisis. Everyone was to blame. And so, for a long time, no one was. One day, you are particularly thirsty. The air in the spinning room is thick with cotton dust, and your throat feels raw. You go to the water barrel and take a long drink. Later that afternoon, a new, more violent wave of cramps hits you. You spend much of the night in the foul-smelling latrines, your body racked with sickness. You are not alone. Several other children are suffering the same fate. A stomach bug is sweeping through the factory. You lie in your bunk, shivering and weak, your body dehydrated. You are desperately thirsty, but you are now afraid to drink the water. It's a terrible choice. Suffer the torment of thirst, or risk making yourself even sicker by drinking the very thing that might be causing the illness. You don't know it, but you are caught in the central dilemma of 19th century urban life. The resources that are supposed to sustain you, the food, the water, the very air you breathe, are all laced with invisible dangers. The city that provides your work is also slowly, quietly poisoning you. You live on one side of a great, invisible wall. On your side is the factory, the grime, the hunger. You consume the products of a vast and dishonest system. But somewhere else, on the other side of that wall, in the hidden workshops and back rooms of the city, are the people who create These deceptions, they are the architects of your misery, the unseen chefs in a city-wide kitchen of fraud. You can almost imagine them. A baker in a dusty cellar, not a cheerful man in a clean white apron, but a gaunt figure, his face pale from the flour dust that hangs in the air. He stands before a large wooden trough, mixing his dough. He adds a sack of cheap, low-grade flour, already gray and unappetizing. But then he reaches for another sack, one he keeps hidden in the corner. He takes out a scoop of fine white powder. It could be chalk, it could be alum, it could be plaster, and mixes it in. He is not a craftsman. He is a chemist of deceit, following a recipe designed to turn the least amount of real food into the most amount of sellable product. In another part of the city, the man works in a damp, smelly shed behind his house. This is the tea maker. He stands over a large, flat sheet of copper, which is being heated from below by a smoky fire. He spreads out a huge pile of wet, soggy tea leaves, the refuse he has collected from the kitchens of the rich. As the leaves dry, they sizzle and release a faint, ghostly aroma of tea. He then tosses them with a scoop of black powder, graphite, to restore their dark, healthy-looking color. He is a resurrection ISTE, bringing dead leaves back to a state of fraudulent life. And then there is the dairyman. HES, not in a green pasture, but in a filthy urban yard, surrounded by a few sickly-looking cows. He takes the thin, bluish milk they produce and pours it into a large churn. Then he starts pumping. The black cow, the water cunt, does its work, doubling the volume of the liquid. He looks at the resulting pale, watery substance. It's too translucent. He reaches for a bag of powdered chalk and stirs it in, watching as the liquid clouds up, becoming an opaque, respectable white. He is a magician, an illusionist turning water into milk. These were the foot soldiers of the great army of adulterators. They were not, for the most part, wealthy masterminds. They were often small-time operators, themselves struggling to get by, caught in a brutally competitive market. They were cutting corners to survive, supplying goods to wholesalers and institutions who demanded the lowest possible price and asked no questions. The sheer scale and creativity of this fraudulent food industry is one of the most shocking revelations from the social history of the era. The investigations of men like Arthur Hill Hassel, who used the then new technology of the microscope to examine food samples, read like a horror story. He found pepper bulked out with dust and ground-up seeds. He found mustard colored with lead chromat to give it a vibrant yellow hue. He found pickles and preserved fruits made a brilliant green by being boiled in copper pans. He found sweets, the kind you dreamed of, colored with a whole host of toxic mineral pigments, including lead, mercury, and arsenic. A particularly strange and little-known niche in this world of fake food was the production of counterfeit coffee. Real coffee was expensive. The cheap alternative often contained very little actual coffee bean. Instead, it was made from roasted chicory, carrots, beans, or acorns, all ground up and mixed together to give it the right color and a slightly bitter taste. Producers would sometimes add burnt sugar or even roasted horse liver. The idea of someone drinking a hot beverage made from baked carrots and horse liver is grimly fascinating, a testament to the lengths producers would go to in order to mimic an expensive product. The historical debate here often revolves around culpability and consumer knowledge. How much did the average person know about what was in their food? Did they know they were eating sawdust and chalk? It's unlikely they knew the specific ingredients. But they were not fools. They knew their bread was gritty, their tea was weak, and their milk was thin. The slang of the time is filled with terms for this bad food, showing a clear public awareness of the problem. They knew they were being cheated, but they lacked the scientific proof, the political power, and the economic freedom to do anything about it. They were wrapped. They had to buy the cheap food to survive, even if they knew it was bad for them. You, in the factory, are at the very end of this long chain of deception. You never see the faces of the men who make your bread or dry your tea. They are phantoms, working in the hidden corners of the city. Their workshops are the secret engine rooms that power the factory's dietary regime. They are not intentionally trying to poison you. Specifically, you are not their target. You are just a faceless, anonymous consumer at the bottom of the food chain. Their goal is profit, and your health is simply an externality, a cost that doesn't appear on their ledgers. You sit on your bench, chewing a mouthful of the gritty, tasteless bread. You try to imagine the person who made it. What did he think as he mixed the chalk into the flour? Did he feel a pang of guilt? Or did he just see it as business, as the way things were done? You will never know. You are connected to him by this piece of bread, this artifact of his deceit. He is your provider, your poisoner, a ghost in the machine that is slowly, methodically grinding you down. The gnawing hunger teaches you to see the world differently. You learn to see potential where others only see waste. Everything becomes a resource to be evaluated. And in this new, desperate worldview, one of the greatest treasures you can find is a bone. You might see one in the gutter, discarded from a butcher's shop or tossed from a wealthy person's window after a meal. It's usually picked clean, with no visible scraps of meat left on it. To anyone else, it's garbage. To you, it's a promise. The promise of fat, of flavor, of something more than gruel. You snatch it up, your movements quick and furtive. You hide it in your pocket or under your thin shirt, a secret you guard with your life. The bone feels smooth and hard in your hand. You have a plan for it, back in the grim corners of the factory world, perhaps near the boiler room where it's always warm, or in a hidden spot in the yard. You have a secret place. You might have a scavenged tin can or a broken piece of pottery. This is your personal cauldron. Over a tiny, carefully concealed fire made of twigs and scraps of wood, you perform a sacred ritual. You boil the bone. You put the bone in your can with some of the tainted water from the factory barrel and you wait. It takes a long time. You have to be patient, keeping the fire low so it doesn't create too much smoke and attract attention. As the water heats up, a magical transformation begins to occur. Tiny, iridescent globals of fat begin to rise to the surface, forming a shimmering, greasy film on the water. The water itself slowly begins to change color, taking on a pale, cloudy hue, a faint, meaty smell. The ghost of the animal the bone once belonged to fills the air. This is bone broth in its most primitive form. You are rendering the last, hidden vestiges of nutrition from the bone, the marrow, the collagen, the tiny, unseen bits of fat and protein still clinging to the matrix. For your body, starved of fats and protein, this is liquid gold. After what feels like an eternity, you decide it's ready. You carefully pour the hot, greasy water into your drinking cup. The liquid is thin and tastes mostly of bone and smoke, but it has a savory, fatty quality that is profoundly satisfying. It coats your mouth and warms your belly in a way that gruel never could. It feels like real food. You drink it slowly, savoring every drop. Then you take the bone out of the can. It's been boiled clean, but you might gnaw on it for a while longer, just in case. You don't discard it. You might save it to boil again tomorrow, though the broth will be weaker. Or you might trade it to another child for some other scavenged treasure. This practice of boiling bones was a cornerstone of the diet of the extremely poor. The market for old bones was a well-established part of the urban economy. Bounty robbers would scavenge the streets, collecting bones to sell to a variety of industries. They were used to make fertilizer, charcoal filters, and even fine china, bone china. But the freshest, meat-iced bones were sold to the poor for soup. A penny could buy you a handful of stock bones from a butcher, which a family would boil and dray-boil for days. A particularly grim and little-known detail is the existence of a trade in foreign bones. As Britain's own supply of bones was outstripped by industrial and agricultural demand, merchants began importing them. There are credible, if horrifying, historical accounts of bones being gathered from major European battlefields, like Waterloo and Austerlitz, and shipped back to England. While most of these were destined for industrial use, it's a chilling thought that the bone a desperate child was boiling for soup in a London alley could have once been part of a soldier who fell in a famous battle. The global economy of the 19th century had some very dark and strange supply chains. The historical debate around this practice touches on resilience and agency. Is this story of boiling a found bone a testament to the human spirit's ability to survive and innovate in the face of extreme hardship? Does it show that even in the most oppressive systems, people find small ways to exercise control over their lives and improve their own lot? Or is it simply a pathetic and horrifying illustration of the depths of poverty to which people were pushed? It can, of course, be both. It's a story of incredible ingenuity born of absolute desperation. Your small, secret fire is an act of defiance, a claim to your own survival. But it's a defiance that is only necessary because the system has failed you so completely. You wipe your greasy mouth with the back of your hand. The small cup of broth has not filled your stomach, but it has given you something else. It has given you a feeling of warmth and a small surge of energy. For a few brief moments, you feel a little less like a cog in a machine and a little more like a human being who has provided for himself. You carefully hide your tin can and the precious bone. You have to get back to work before you are missed. As you walk back towards the roaring factory floor, you feel the familiar ache in your legs and the fatigue in your bones. But today, it feels a little more bearable. You have a secret. You have a source of nourishment that the factory doesn't control. It's a small, greasy, hard-won victory. And in your world, that's enough to keep you going. You are part of a massive, unofficial experiment in human endurance. The currency of this experiment is the calorie. Though you've never heard the word, you only know its presence by the feeling of energy, and its absence by the hollow ache of fatigue. You are living in a state of severe, chronic caloric deficit, and your body is the ledger where the horrifying math is tallied every day. Let's try to do the accounting. A growing child of your age, doing light activity, might need around 600 to 2,000 calories a day to thrive. But you are not doing light activity. You are on your feet for 14, sometimes 16 hours. You are performing repetitive physical labor, piecing threads, hauling materials, cleaning heavy machinery. Modern estimates for this kind of workload would place your energy needs far higher, perhaps closer to 500 calories or more, just to maintain your body weight. Now, let's look at the income side of the ledger. Breakfast is a bowl of watery gruel. Let's be generous. Let's say it's made with a decent amount of oats and not too much water. That might provide you with 150 calories. The midday meal is the main one. Another bowl of gruel, perhaps slightly larger, and the block of bread, The gruel might be another 200 calories. The bread is harder to calculate. It's adulterated with chalk or sawdust, which have zero nutritional value. The flour itself is low grade, a generous estimate for that gray. Gritty block might be 150 calories. So, your midday meal totals around 350 calories. The evening meal is a repeat of breakfast. Another bowl of thin gruel. Another 150 calories. On a standard day, your total caloric intake is somewhere in the realm of 650 calories. On a good day, a Sunday, you get the feast. The pathetic portion of boiled meat might offer 100 calories. The potato another 80. Add that to the gruel and bread, and your Sunday total might climb towards 800 or 900 calories. On a bad day, when you are punished and your meal is withheld, your intake could be as low as 300 calories, or even zero. The numbers are stark and unforgiving. You are expending well over 0 calories a day, but taking in only 650 every single day. You are running a deficit of more than 0 calories. Your body is forced to find this energy somewhere. It finds it by consuming itself. First, it burns through any fat reserves you might have had when you arrived. Then, it begins to break down your muscle tissue. You are getting thinner, weaker, not just because you are not growing, but because your body is literally eating itself to provide the energy to run the looms. This science of starvation was not entirely unknown at the time. In the latter half of the 19th century, chemists and physiologists in France and Germany were beginning to do the first serious scientific studies on metabolism and nutrition. They conducted experiments, sometimes on animals, sometimes on themselves, to measure the energy content of different foods and the energy expenditure of different activities. The calorie was being defined and understood as a unit of heat and energy. A little known but fascinating part of this history is how this new scientific knowledge was sometimes used not to improve diets, but to make them more efficiently miserable. Prison and workhouse authorities, armed with this new data, could calculate with even greater precision the absolute minimum number of calories needed to prevent death, allowing them to design diets that were even more meager and economical, all under the guise of being scientific. The historical debate here is a chilling one. Did the factory owners know they were starving their workforce? They certainly didn't know it in terms of calories, but they absolutely knew it in practical terms. They saw the children getting thinner. They saw them fainting from exhaustion. They saw their high rates of sickness and mortality. They chose to accept these outcomes as a necessary cost of doing business. The experiment you're a part of is not a scientific one to gather knowledge. It is an economic one to find the absolute lowest cost of human labor. The effects of this caloric deficit are your daily reality. It's the constant, bone-deep weariness that sleep never cures. It's the feeling of being cold all the time, because your body doesn't have enough energy to produce adequate heat. It's the dizziness that washes over you when you stand up too quickly. It's the inability to concentrate, the mental fog that makes every task a struggle. You have learned to conserve energy in small, unconscious ways. You walk more slowly than you used to. You lean against the wall when you have to stand for a long time. You avoid any unnecessary movement. Your body is in a permanent state of emergency power-saving mode. You lie in your bunk at night, feeling the sharp angles of your own hips and ribs through your thin shirt. You are a living ghost, a fading photograph of the child you once were. The factory demands more from you every day than it gives you. The math is simple. It's unsustainable. You, and the children around you, are being used up. Like any other raw material, you are fuel for the machines. and you are being consumed. 1 calorie at a time. The final calculation is inevitable. At some point, the ledger must be balanced. And you know, with a cold, quiet certainty, that it will not be balanced in your favor. For years, your world has been confined to the factory walls and the bleak streets around it. Your story, and the stories of the thousands of children like you, has been a silent one, told only in hushed whispers in dark dormitories. But now, something is changing. The silence is being broken. People on the outside, people with clean hands and full stomachs, are starting to tell your story for you. You wouldn't know it, but your life is becoming a matter of public debate. It starts as a trickle of words, then becomes a flood. It appears in pamphlets passed around in gentlemen's clubs, in reports read before parliamentary committees, and most powerfully, in the pages of novels and poems that are being read by an increasingly literate middle class. You become a character, a symbol. Perhaps you are a small, pale boy in a Charles Dickens novel. Your innocence a stark contrast to the grime and cruelty of the city around you. Your plight is used to pull at the heartstring of the reader, to make them feel a sense of moral outrage and pity. Dickens, who himself had a traumatic childhood experience working in a factory, was a master at this. He didn't just write stories. He launched social crusades in print, using powerful, emotional narratives to expose the dark underbelly of Victorian prosperity. His readers might weep for you, the fictional character, and in doing so, begin to question the real-world system that created you. Or perhaps you are described in the fiery, passionate poetry of someone like Elizabeth Barrett Browning. In her poem The Cry of the Children, she gives you a voice, a heartbreaking lament against the relentless turning of the iron wheels. She makes your suffering eloquent, turning your silent pain into a powerful accusation against a society that values profit over human life. The poem is a direct assault on the conscience of the nation. You also appear in a different kind of writing, one that is less emotional but perhaps even more damning. The official report. Men like Dr. James Phillips K. Shuttleworth or Leonard Horner, acting as factory inspectors, venture into your world. They are the first to systematically document your reality. They measure the hours you work. They record the accidents. They describe your physical deformities, your pale complexion, your constant cough, and they write about your food. They describe the watery gruel and the miserable rations in dry, factual, bureaucratic language that is, in its own way, more shocking than any novelist's prose. These reports, filled with statistics and dispassionate observation, provide the hard evidence that reformers need to argue for change. What of the lesser known, but incredibly important, forms of this literature of exposure was the parliamentary testimony. Reformers would bring actual factory workers, sometimes even children, to testify before government committees. Imagine being taken from the factory, cleaned up, and brought into a grand, intimidating room in London. Men in wigs and robes would ask you questions about your life. How long is your workday? What do you eat? Have you ever been beaten? The transcripts of these testimonies are some of the most powerful historical documents of the era. They are the unfiltered voices of people like you, speaking their truth directly to power. Of course, there is a fierce debate among historians about the true nature of this voice. Were you, as a child witness, truly speaking for yourself? Or were you being coached and used as a pawn by middle-class reformers, who put words in your mouth to advance their own political agenda? The answer is complex. The reformers certainly had their own motives, and they undoubtedly shaped the narratives. But the raw, painful details in these accounts, the descriptions of hunger, exhaustion, and fear have an undeniable ring of authenticity. They are a collaboration between the witness and the interrogator, a flawed but essential window into a hidden world. You would be unaware of all this. You cannot read. The novels and reports and poems are as alien to you as the lives of the people who write and read them. But you might feel the faintest ripple effects of their work. You might see a new face in the factory one day. A man in a clean coat, holding a notebook and asking the overseer questions. You might notice the overseer seems a little more restrained, a little less free with his fists. When the strange man is watching, the change is slow, almost imperceptible, but the seeds of it are being planted. Your silent suffering is being given a voice. Your private pain is becoming a public problem. The walls of the factory are becoming transparent, and the world outside is being forced to look in. They may not see you, the individual child, with your specific memories and fears. They see a symbol of a broken system, but for the first time, they're seeing it, and that, in itself, is a revolution. The whispers from your dormitory are being amplified, and they are starting to echo in the halls of power. The echoes of those whispers, the stories told by novelists, and the data gathered by inspectors, begin to coalesce into something more concrete, a conversation about laws. For years, the prevailing philosophy has been laissez-faire, a French term meaning let it be. The idea was that the government should not interfere in the economy. A factory owner should be free to run his business as he sees fit, to set wages and hours and conditions without meddling from politicians. But the evidence of abuse, of mass sickness, of children being literally worked to death, has become too overwhelming to ignore. The conversation doesn't start with your food. It starts with your time. The earliest battles are fought over the length of the workday. The Factory Acts of the 1832 and 1842 are landmark pieces of legislation. They are fiercely debated. Owners and their political allies argue that any restriction on labor hours will ruin the British economy, making it impossible to compete with other nations. They claim it is an infringement on the freedom of contract, the right of a worker to agree to work for as long as they wish. An absurd concept when applied to a child who has no choice at all. But the reformers, armed with their stories and statistics, slowly win the argument. Laws are passed limiting the workday for children to 12 hours, then to 10. These laws are often weak and poorly enforced. Many factory owners find loopholes or simply ignore them. But the principle has been established. The state has a right and a duty to protect its most vulnerable workers. The conversation about your food is more complicated. It's one thing to regulate time. It's another thing entirely to regulate what goes on a private citizen's plate or what a baker puts in his dough. The idea of food safety as a government responsibility is radical and new. The turning point comes with the scientific breakthroughs that make the invisible visible. The work of pioneers like Arthur Hill Hassel, using his microscope to expose the secrets in bread and tea, provides the undeniable proof of widespread, systematic adulteration. His findings, published in the respected medical journal The Lancet, cause a public scandal. It's no longer just a case of the poor being given poor quality food. It's a case of the entire population being sold food that is fraudulent and often poisonous. The middle classes, who thought their more expensive food was safe, are horrified to learn their own bread contains alum and their children's sweets contain lead. This creates the political will for change. The first major piece of legislation is the Adulteration of Food and Drink Act of 1860. It is, by modern standards, a very weak law. It makes it illegal to sell food containing injurious ingredients, but it doesn't create any real system of inspection or enforcement. It's a starting point. The Declaration of Intent, a lesser known but fascinating aspect of this early food legislation, is the debate over what constituted adulteration. Was adding chicory to coffee an adulteration? Or was it simply creating a new, cheaper product? Was adding water to milk a harmful adulteration? Or just a commercial fraud that should be handled as a weights and measures issue? These debates were fierce, pitting public health advocates against powerful food industry lobbies. The early laws often had to make strange compromises, a reflection of a society grappling with entirely new concepts of consumer protection. Historians are still debating the real-world impact of these early laws. Did they immediately lead to safer food? Not really. Enforcement was spotty at best, and penalties were often too light to be a real deterrent. Many manufacturers simply continued their old practices, betting they wouldn't get caught. The real change was more gradual. The laws created a new standard, a new public expectation of what food should be. They empowered local authorities to appoint public analysts, creating a new profession of scientists dedicated to food safety. It was the beginning of a long, slow process of cleaning up the nation's food supply. For you, in the factory, the immediate impact of these new laws is likely zero. Your owner is not going to suddenly start buying pure flour for your bread because of a law passed in faraway London. The change happens at a level far above your head. But these laws are a sign that the ground is shifting under your feet. The old world of let it be is slowly dying. A new world, where the state accepts some responsibility for the well-being of its citizens, is slowly being born. You are still hungry. You are still eating the same miserable rations. But unknown to you, the great battle of ideas is being fought. And one of the central subjects of that battle is the very substance you are reluctantly swallowing. The right not to be starved, the right not to be poisoned by the food you eat, is being debated for the first time. It is a right you have never known, but it is a right that future generations will one day take for granted. Thanks to the slow, painful, and often invisible fight that is just beginning to stir the conscience of the nation. Years pass. The relentless rhythm of the factory has become the rhythm of your life. You are no longer the small, bewildered child who arrived in a cart. You are a teenager now, your body long and thin, shaped by malnutrition and hard labor. The factory is the only world you truly know. One day, something extraordinary happens. A distant relative, perhaps an aunt you barely remember, has passed away and left a tiny inheritance, just enough for a family member to pay your indenture fee and bring you out of the factory system. Or maybe a reformist church group has raised the funds to liberate a few children. The reason is unimportant. The result is everything. You are leaving. You walk out of the factory gates for the last time. The air of the city, still thick with coal smoke and filth, smells like freedom. You find a new life, perhaps as a domestic servant in a slightly better off household, or as a laborer on a dock or a building site. The work is still hard. The hours are still long. But there is a crucial difference. You are paid in coin, and you can buy your own food. You stand before a baker's stall in a street market. You have a few pennies clutched in your hand, real money that is yours. The baker has a variety of loaves. There is the dog, heady rye bread, similar to the kind you vaguely remember from your first home. And there is a lighter-looking loaf. It's more expensive, the kind of bread you used to see through a shop window, with a feeling of immense luxury. You buy a small piece of the white loaf. You find a quiet corner and lift the bread to your mouth. You take a bite, and it's strange. The texture is soft and light, almost fluffy. It yields to your bite with no resistance. None of the gritty, jacky density you are used to. But the flavor is a profound disappointment. It's bland. It tastes of almost nothing. It lacks the faint, dusty, mineral tang of the factory bread. A taste you didn't even realize you had become accustomed to. This soft, clean bread feels insubstantial, like eating a cloud. You take another bite, and then another, trying to find the breadness in it, the satisfying, hearty quality you expect. But it's not there. You have forgotten what real food tastes like. Or rather, your sense of taste has been completely rewired by years of eating fraudulent, adulterated, and monotonous food. Your palate is a ghost, haunted by the flavors of deprivation, the chemical tang of alum, the gritins of chalk, the overwhelming blandness of watery, gruel. These have become your baseline for what food is. Real, honest food now tastes alien and wrong. This phenomenon is known to historians and sociologists who study long-term institutionalization and poverty. It's a form of sensory conditioning. The brain adapts to its environment. When the diet is consistently poor and lacks variety, the palate literally loses its ability to recognize and appreciate complex or subtle flavors. The memory of taste fades, replaced by the more immediate reality. A particularly poignant and little-known example of this can be found in the accounts of people who emigrated from extreme poverty in Europe to America in the late 19th and early 20th centuries. Some wrote letters home, expressing their shock and even dislike for the American diet. The bread was too soft and sweet. The meat was too rich. The abundance of sugar was sickening. Their bodies and their tastes had been shaped by a lifetime of scarcity, and the sudden introduction of a rich, varied diet was a system shock, both physically and psychologically. The historical debate here touches on the long-term cultural impact of this era of bad food. Did the industrial diet permanently alter the British palate? Some food historians argue that it did, leading to a national preference for blander, more processed foods. The subtle, complex flavors of traditional, slow-cooked peasant cuisine were lost, replaced by a taste for the simple, strong, and often artificial flavors of industrial food. Sugar, salt, and fat. The generations that grew up in the factories and workhouses passed on their conditioned taste to their own children, creating a culinary legacy of deprivation. You continue to eat the soft, white bread, a feeling of confusion and sadness welling up inside you. This was supposed to be a moment of triumph, a celebration of your freedom. But instead, it's a moment of profound loss. The factory has taken more from you than your childhood and your health. It has stolen your very ability to enjoy one of life's most fundamental pleasures. It has followed you out of the gates and will sit with you at every meal for the rest of your life. You finish the bread. It has filled your stomach, but it has left you feeling empty. You look at the other foods for sale in the market, the colorful vegetables, the fresh fish, the rounds of cheese. They look beautiful, but you are almost afraid to try them. You don't trust your own senses anymore. You are a stranger in the world of real food, an exile from the kingdom of taste. The factory has branded you, not on your skin, but on your tongue, and you realize, with a heavy heart, that you may never truly be free of it. You are older now. The years have passed. You have survived. That, in itself, is a victory. You have a family of your own, a small room in a tenement, a life that is hard but is undeniably yours. The factory is a memory, a dark story you sometimes tell your own children, who listen with wide eyes, barely able to comprehend the world you describe. But the factory is not just a memory. It is a ghost that lives inside your bones. a phantom that haunts your body in countless ways. The diet of your childhood has left a permanent, indelible mark on your physical being. The legacy written in chronic pain and ill health. You are not as tall as you should be. Your growth was permanently stunted by the years of malnutrition. You stand a full head shorter than the young men of your children's generation, who are growing up with slightly more to eat. Your back is a constant source of dull, aching pain. Your spine slightly curved from the rickets you suffered as a child in the long hours spent stooped over a machine. Your teeth, or what's left of them, are a testament to your past. Many were lost years ago to decay and scurvy. The remaining ones are crooked and stained. Eating can be a painful, difficult process. You often have to mash your food or stick to soft things. A cruel echo of the endless gruel of your youth. You have a persistent cough that worsens in the damp winter months. A souvenir of the cotton dust that filled your lungs for 16 hours a day. Your joints ache with a pain that feels ancient. A form of arthritis brought on early by years of repetitive strain in the body that never had the resources to properly repair itself. This collection of ailments was the shared inheritance of your generation. The first long-term studies of public health, which began in the late 19th and early 20th centuries, revealed the shocking scale of this problem. Researchers examining new army recruits from industrial cities found them to be, on average, smaller, lighter, and in far poorer physical condition than recruits from rural areas. They were a generation physically marked by the conditions of their upbringing. The factory diet had created a physically degraded workforce, a fact that began to alarm not just social reformers, but military and industrial leaders who worried about the nation's strength. One of the more subtle, and less discussed, legacies of this malnourishment is its epigenetic impact. This is a field of science that was completely unknown at the time. Epigenetics is the study of how behaviors and environment can cause changes that affect the way your genes work. Modern research has shown that severe malnutrition, particularly in childhood and even in a mother during pregnancy, can leave chemical marks on a person's DNA. These marks don't change the DNA sequence itself, but they can change how the body reads it, affecting a person's long-term health and even, some studies suggest, the health of their children. The historical debate here is a profound one. Can the damage of one generation be passed on to the next? While the science is still evolving, some historians and scientists argue that the hungry gap of the Industrial Revolution had consequences that rippled through subsequent generations. The children of the survivors, while better fed themselves, may have inherited a predisposition to certain metabolic diseases or other health problems. The ghost of the factory diet may not have just haunted the survivors. It may have cast a long, faint shadow over their descendants as well. You sit by the fire in your small room, watching your own children eat. They have a piece of bread real, honest bread and a small piece of cheese. It's not a feast, but it's more than you ever had. You feel a fierce, protective love for them. You are determined that they will never know the gnawing, endless hunger you knew. But as you watch them, a sudden, sharp pain flares in your back, a familiar reminder of your past. You press a hand to the spot, your face tight with the spasm. Your child looks at you with concern. Is it your ache again? You nod, forcing a small smile. It's nothing. An old friend come to visit. You are a living archive of a brutal time. Your body is a history book. Each ache and pain, a footnote telling a story of a stolen childhood and the diet of lies. You have survived, but you are not unscathed. You are a walking, breathing monument to the true cost of progress. The factory may have been built of bricks and mortar, but it was also built of the bodies of children like you. And while you may have escaped its walls, you will carry a part of it inside you for the rest of your days. You are old. You've outlived the factory owner, the cruel overseers, and most of the children you once knew. You've lived to see a world that would have been unimaginable in your youth. A world with motor cars, with electric lights, with men who can fly in machines. You've seen laws passed that not only limit the hours of work, but also send children to school instead of factories. The world has changed. You are lying in a bed, not a hard, narrow bunk in a crowded dormitory, but your own bed, with a soft mattress and a clean, warm blanket. You are in your small room, the sounds of the city outside muted by the glass in the window. You are not in pain. For the first time in a long, long time, the chronic aches in your back and your joints have faded into a gentle numbness. You are not hungry. This is the most profound change of all. For your entire life, hunger has been your shadow, your constant companion. The gnawing emptiness in your stomach has been the background music to your existence. Even in your better years, the memory of it, the fear of its return, has always been there. But now, that feeling is gone. You feel a strange lightness, a sense of peace that is entirely new. The feeling is not in your mind. It is in your belly. The space that was once occupied by a desperate, aching void is now filled with a quiet calm. The fire that burned for so long has finally gone out. This sensation, this final release from the primal urge for food, is something that has been described in palliative care and in the accounts of those nearing the end of their lives. As the body begins to shut down its systems, the powerful biological drives for hunger and thirst can diminish and disappear. For someone who has been haunted by hunger their entire life, this cessation can feel less like a loss and more like a liberation. You close your eyes, and the memories come, not the hard, painful memories of the factory, but older, softer ones. You are a small child again, sitting at a rough wooden table. The air smells of wood smoke and baking bread. Ache candle flickers, casting a warm, golden light. Your mother's hands, rough but gentle, push a slice of dark, heavy bread towards you. You can almost taste it. The dense, nutty flavor of rye and wheat. The sharp albumes of the hard cheese. The rich, creamy coating of real milk on your tongue. It's the memory of your first life. The life before the factory. The life where food was not a weapon, or a lie, or a currency of survival, but an act of love. The memory has been buried for decades under layers of gray, tasteless gruel. But now, at the very end, it has returned to you, clear and bright and whole. Historians often debate the end of an era. When did the Industrial Revolution's worst excesses truly cease? Was it with the passage of a specific law, the invention of a new technology, or the slow, gradual improvement of living standards? There is no single answer. But perhaps an era only truly ends when its last survivor is gone, when the last person who holds the living memory of that time in their body and their mind finally lets it go. You are that person. You are the last repository of the taste of chalk and bread, the feel of a half-rotten potato, the desperate, hollow ache of a child's starvation. And as you lie there, in the quiet of your room, you can feel these things beginning to dissolve. The ghost is leaving the machine. A faint smile touches your lips. The hunger is gone. The long, exhausting battle is finally over. You have made it home. You can rest now. The silence in your stomach is a profound and final peace. The last ledger has been balanced. And so, the story ends. The long day's shift is over. The noise of the machinery fades into a soft, distant hum, Like the sound of a fan in a quiet room. The sharp edges of the world begin to soften and blur. The harsh gaslight of the factory giving way to the gentle, hazy light of a dream just beginning. Feel the weight of your own warm blanket, the softness of your pillow. There is no cold draft here, no scratchy wool, no hard bunk bed, just comfort and safety and quiet. The aches and pains of the day, the worries of the world you've left behind, just let them dissolve. Let them be carried away on the slow, gentle current that is pulling you now towards sleep. You are drifting now, in that peaceful, weightless space between waking and dreaming. The hunger is gone. The thirst is quenched. There is only a deep, profound sense of peace, a quiet stillness that fills you from the inside out. You have journeyed far tonight, into a world of hardship and shadow. But you have returned. You are safe. You are warm. You are at rest. Allow your breathing to slow, to deepen. Inhale the calm. Exhale the last vestiges of the day. You are floating now, on a quiet river, under a sky full of soft, gentle stars. There is nothing to do now, but drift and sleep. Sleep now, deep, peaceful sleep. The end of the article. Good night.